Oi oi, it's your boy, the Calvin Cater of great fights now means bad fights later. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following UFC 300, one of the best events I've seen in a very long time, maybe ever. You know, it's Pride Bushido 6, UFC 217. There's a few, but this is definitely in the pantheon of greats. Banger card. I mean, this is the thing. Everyone knew it would be a banger card because you can look at bookings and go, that's good, that's good, that's good. That will probably yield a good, interesting fight. Which is also why we can look at these Apex events and go, that's not great. But no Apex today. Which means I'm skipping my usual positive thing that happened in combat sports that isn't UFC at the Apex segment and going straight into just how hard this card went. What a fun night of fights. Almost, I think, was there a bad one? No, even like Holly Holm, by losing decisively, prevented herself from stinking up the card. Even Alexander Rakic came to fight. It was fantastic. Now, people said that everyone would because there was a $300,000 bonus on the line. But yeah, do that every card because you got the money and we need more of this stuff. What should we do first? I mean, it's tempting to do Holloway Gaethje first because it was just so fun. I'm going to get into Saruki and Oliveira later, and we'll talk some like fine point Tekkas stuff. You can fade out if that's not your sort of thing. I'm going to try and get that segment, and I'll match it up with some choppy footage of the fight that I can put on YouTube without them getting mad about, and drop that later in the week. But that was a terrific fight too. What wasn't? I mean, aside from like Bo Nickel running through Cody Brundage in the least convincing way for a matchup that he was definitely supposed to win easily, this card was banger. Let's go from the top. Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. I said on the preview of last week's Boycast and also on the Boycast, I said this fight intrigues me. I said, there's more to it than just like, big man go bonk. I mean, it's two big men who want to go bonk, but there was some stuff I was saying Jamal Hill, he likes to switch hip. I'd like him to stay southpaw because then at least his shoulder is protecting him from that lead hook a little bit, because that lead hook is the dim mark. The dude has the death touch. He's got one of the best left hooks ever. If you've never read my Advanced Striking 2.0 and you're a Patreon boy, go read that for Alex Pereira because I talk a good deal about the left hook there. But to be honest, I was mainly talking about his left hook. In kickboxing, he used his left hook a lot as a counter because the left hook is the king of the counters. And to get a really pure body weight behind it left hook, you want to be going from your left foot to your right foot, weight-wise. Which also means going from your front foot to your back foot. So really good left hooks, like the absolute purest. When I'm saying pure, that's body weight, as much body weight as possible behind the blow. They are quite often delivered sort of fading away. So Alex Pereira used to do like right high kick, he used to do low kick and then step back and left hook. And then guys very quickly worked out that they didn't want to chase him on the low kick. So he started throwing right high kick. And then people just sort of forget. They go, oh, he tried to kick me in the head, the dirty bastard. And then they run in on you and get left hooked. But some of his most recent work in MMA has been left hooks going forward, which they can be more difficult to get power into. They, in terms of punching purity as in body weight behind it, you are throwing a punch from left to right while also trying to advance onto your left foot. So there are mechanics that you can use to get some power in your hook, obviously, because Alex Pereira has been smoking people with it. But it's not as stiff as if Jamal Hill was chasing him and then got left hooked, as Pereira was fading back onto his right leg. But one of the things that I think a lot of people saw coming was Jamal Hill, long stance, bounces in and out a lot. And if you watched his fight with Ovinson Prue, just his legs are always there to kick and he doesn't do anything about it. And his answer to being kicked in the legs was to try and stand firm on the lead leg, take it and throw punches to the body, which I like, coming back from low kicks or anytime the opponent kicks, if you can get in on his body while he's on one leg. Great shout. Tyrone Spong used to be amazing at that in kickboxing because it makes sense. When it's hard to get to people's body generally in combat sports because they're moving around all the time, you have to get quite close to them. When are they least likely to be able to move their body away from you? When they're on one leg or when they're recovering their leg from kicking. So he did that pretty well against Ovinson Prue, but he was still taking the kicks on the legs all the time. And we've just watched Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya, Jan Blachowicz, two guys who are great at checking a low kick and gave them trouble with his low kicks. And then he fought Jiri, who is terrible at checking low kicks. And basically, I mean, it was kind of like Jiri's fight, which we'll get onto in a minute, on UFC 300 against Alexander Rakic. Jiri's trying to fight while also contending with low kicks that he will never defend. It's like he's got to finish the fight before his legs collapse. And his legs were basically collapsing at the end of round 1 against Pereira. So there was always this, like, Pereira's going to kick him in the legs. What's Jamal Hill going to do about it? And the impressive thing that I've seen from Pereira is that, this is something I talk about a lot, but the calf kicking, everyone learns how to calf kick because when you're orthodox versus orthodox, you can throw your right leg to their calf from a long way away. You can run up into it. You can feel very safe in that MMA sort of way where we don't really want to stay in trading range. But then if they meet an opponent who's southpaw, or if the opponent takes a couple of good calf kicks and changes legs, they suddenly don't have a calf kick anymore. Whereas if you have an ounce of sense, you train to do step-up calf kicks with your lead leg as well. And there's very few people who are good at it, like Arnold Allen, Roman Kopylov. There's a couple of others, but most MMA fighters are still like massive hole in their game if you switch stances or if you happen to be the opposite stance to them. Alex Pereira is very good in that he's got this weird calf kick, which I did a video on, by the way. Go check on my YouTube. It's called Filthy Casual's Guide to Alex Pereira and Kicking Weird, because he throws his kick not into the leg, but like upwards against the leg with the inside of his shin, so that it's very hard to see coming. And he holds his shoulder back too. So he's really like last second you see it and you go, oh no, I've been kicked in the calf. But he can do that off his lead leg as well. He steps up with his rear leg and he throws his lead leg upwards on a diagonal and slaps the outside of your lead leg with his inner shin or ankle. And he hit a couple of those on Jamal Hill, and Jamal Hill did not like it. And then Jamal Hill hit him in the dick with a kick, and Pereira went, hey, you kicked me in the dick. And just as Herb Dean's stepping in, he goes, hold off, I've got this. he then steps in as Jamal Hill's along the fence. And I think the plan was probably to sort of fluster him a bit. I don't think he could have expected anything like the results he got, because he stepped in with a left hook, and it was quite a conservative left hook. If you watch him against Sean Strickland, when he knows he's got Strickland, because he's thrown like 3 body jabs, and Sean Strickland's been doing that thing where he gets up on one leg and reaches down towards his belly with his right hand. He's standing on one leg with his chin up in the air and his arm away from his chin, or his arm away from his guard, and Pereira goes wide and swings it way out to get as much stank on it as possible. This one, he steps in with his elbow quite tight. He throws almost like a shovel hook, which is a term that people very rarely bring out and often mean completely different things. But the hook's thrown with the elbow tight, often on sort of like an upward angle. And the reason that it landed so well is that Jamal Hill tried to punch back. He tried to throw his left straight, and that right shoulder that I said, you know, if you stay southpaw, your right shoulder should protect you a good amount from that danger of the left hook without you having to see it coming. But as soon as he threw the left straight, his shoulders square up, his right shoulder's away from his chin. He has his chin up in the air a lot anyway. And the left hook just comes in, and it's like pinky knuckle and ring finger knuckle. The old Jack Dempsey power line. Also, you know, you can hurt yourself hitting like that, but doesn't even get all of it, but it just hits him on the chin. And Jamal Hill goes down, follows up with some punches in sort of a leg drag position, and then stands up and does a meme gesture. Gives us one of the great knockout photos. But man, what a shot, what a performance from Alex Pereira. I think this is one of those ones where, because it went so quickly, I mean, 3 minutes actually it went, but there wasn't an awful lot happened up to it. Because it happened so quickly, Jamal Hill's going to have a very hard case to get a rematch ever against Alex Pereira. We didn't really see it unfold that far. He never attempted never made like a good faith attempt at a takedown. I don't think he even faked a takedown at any point. But he didn't bring out like a rounded game. He just got kicked in the legs a few times, kicked Pereira in the dick, and then got knocked down. I'm not on board with the idea that standing and banging with Pereira is just off limits, and everyone, even like Israel Adesanya, should be shooting takedowns all the time. There's been enough people in kickboxing and MMA who've had some success on the feet against him. In kickboxing, there's been a number of different styles have had success against him, from Belgawi, who is a couple of inches taller than him and fought long and switched stances lots, to someone like Vakatov, who basically just kept his hands tight, and he would body jab his way, like not even body jab. Pereira threw a couple of body jabs in this one. I love Pereira's body jab. But he'd throw like a jab to the chest about the height of his shoulder because he was like a head shorter than Pereira. He'd throw this jab to the chest and keep stepping in and pushing Pereira back. And then he'd corner him against the ropes and start swinging from there. But then, of course, you've got the danger of the left hook as you're opening up and swinging on him along the ropes. Or cage, in this case. But, he is a guy who could be moved around. If you watched him, like he did in this fight, I was talking about like how he does these long-ass retreats. And he did this long-ass retreat all the way back to the cage. And then Jamal Hill just sort of like let him circle around and come back. And it's like, if you were fighting in the smartest way against Alex Pereira, you would be trying to make use of that. You'd be trying to go, okay, well, now he's in the fence. I can at least, if I can't get the takedown, I'll at least tie him up there and wear on him a bit, You're trying to take every little advantage you can. And if someone backs themselves onto the fence quite a lot or goes back on a straight line quite a lot, that's always a good one. But one of the really interesting things that you saw in this fight was, I love Alex Pereira's stance. I've talked about it in my article before, but it's so square and his hands are up making a window. So when he's going backwards on a line like that, Jamal Hill's throwing these straight shots at him and they're having to go through Pereira's hands. So even if he can reach Pereira, who's so tall, so long, and leaning back and retreating, Pereira can still just bat his forearms and take the shots out of the way. And by getting people to fire through that window, he also sets up that beautiful counter left hook, which I don't know if he caught Jamal Hill with any of them, but in his kickboxing days, definitely. He'd have his hands out wide in front of his shoulders, rather than in tight in a guard, and the opponent would throw like the right hand through the middle, and he'd just left hook across the top. Because he was already square and his hands were already outside the opponent's shoulder. Going to be talking about line a fair bit in the Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje stuff. Actually, you know what? Let's just get into that. Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje. What a fight. I didn't see this coming at all. Max Holloway is such a wonderful fighter because while he's not... This is the thing, we're always talking about rounded and how the idea of well-rounded changes. And I always use Frank Shamrock as the example where he had a punch and a kick and a takedown and he was quite good on the ground. And people were like, oh, he's so rounded, I can't imagine anyone beating him. Whereas now we're talking about like, if you're a good striker, grappler, wrestler, there's still parts of each of those games that are exploitable or things that you don't do in parts of each of those games for everyone. Max Holloway's striking, he has so many tools that he can really... I'm always talking about like messing with the sliders. He can go more kicks, more bodywork, less bodywork, more jabs, less jabs. He can really change who he is while still keeping all the things that he uses in every fight. More front kicks to the body, more front kicks to the thigh. He's got so many tricks. More stance switching, less stance switching. The length of his stance. I mean, the stance is something that's really important in this fight, in the Aldo fights, in the second Volkanovski fight. When he's concerned about the low kick, Max Holloway fights very differently to when he isn't concerned about the low kick. When he isn't concerned about the low kick, he's the best boxer in UFC, baby. And he's fighting long, and he's stabbing his lead leg in right next to yours. When he's concerned about the right low kick, go back and watch his fights with Aldo, watch this one, watch the second Volkanovski one where he fights a lot shorter. But he fights in what I think I call it like a Wyatt Earp stance because he's so bow-legged. But he's not upright, like in a Muay Thai sort of context. His stance is short, but his legs are bent. So it's almost like he's ready to start sprinting. But he is much more compact. His lead heel is only a little bit further forward than his rear toes. He's often up on the ball of his back foot and his right leg is bent, so his knee is down. And then the line is what I was going to talk about, both against Aldo and Gaethje. If you want to box someone, if you want to get in with your jab, if you want to be behind your lead shoulder, you're often trying to get your lead foot down the middle between their legs. Especially when you're jabbing in. If you're trying to open up with your right hand and then slide out to the left side, you might step slightly forward and to the left. But most of the time when two people fight, the lead feet are there, and your lead foot is often inside the line of your opponent's rear foot. Max Holloway fought a lot of this fight and the Aldo fight with his lead foot about on a line or outside of Justin Gaethje's rear foot. So he was almost like standing slightly off to the left of where he would normally be. Holloway's left, that is. Off to Gaethje's right. And that makes it very hard to throw good, powerful low kicks without landing early. And that's a lot of checking kicks, a lot of blocking kicks If you pick your leg up to check a kick, or you stand there and you take it on your forearms, and you are at the point where the kick was going to terminate anyway, your arm or your shin is just a heavy bag. A lot of good blocking and checking is moving the block or check out into the kick, catching it 80%, 70% through. So if you're already standing off to the side, you've taken a little bit of the comfort off their kick anyway. And his lead foot was always pointing forwards or even slightly out, so he could bend his knee and take the kick on the... if it was coming for the quad, if it was coming for the thigh, he could take it on the quad. If it was coming for the calf, he could take it on the shin. And he was always in good position, ready to take it. And there were a couple where he got out of position where he did his boxing and then tried to back out, and that's when his feet would be in a more malleable, kickable position, not in a good, ready for the kick position. I mean, that's where you've got to catch people with low kicks, when they're not ready for them. I mean, we'll talk about this with Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan, but huge difference between kicking someone on the counter and kicking someone just like naked in the leg. You know, if they've got any sense, you're not going to get naked low kicks off on someone and actually hurt them. And this was one of those ones where people got mad about the Rogan DC narrative because they decided quite early on that Max was taking a lot of low kicks. If you look at the stats on something like Fight Metric, who I think they also do the official UFC stats, so Gaethje connected something like 33 out of 36 kicks. Max Holloway was not withdrawing his leg and letting the kick swing through. But Max Holloway was not getting hurt by these kicks most of the time. There was a bruise forming on the outside of his calf by the end of the fight, but certainly not like when Rogan was going, oh, his leg's mangled, he's having trouble walking. And you go, no, he isn't. He's doing exactly what he did before. And this is a dude who can comfortably change stances and is choosing not to. Where most fighters get kicked in the leg a few times and they're not comfortable changing stances, and they'll still switch to southpaw and fight awkwardly from there until their leg feels better or until they get finished. The lesson from the second Dustin Poirier fight was get to the body earlier, because Max Holloway was successfully hitting the body in the later rounds and starting to get back into the fight, and you're going, if you just started doing that earlier, you could have won this one. So from very early on against Justin Gaethje, he's getting to the body, he's going with the right hand to the body. There's some really interesting stuff in this fight because Justin Gaethje has always been a very sort of feely fighter. He does a lot of like reaching with his lead hand, which results in some eye pokes in his other fights, but we're going to get into eye pokes. I mean, it was Max Holloway, unfortunately, who did 2 eye pokes in this fight, but he tends to do some feeling with his lead hand and grab him behind the head with the lead hand. And his lead hand isn't really jabbing much until later in the fight when he goes, oh, I'll try jabbing, and it works. But when his lead hand came away from his body, it made him the perfect mark for Max Holloway's right straight to the body, which isn't knocking anyone out immediately. But you can watch some of the hardest dudes in MMA take it a few times and start reaching for it and making, what you would call mistakes, but it's like a good body jab. If they let you have it for free, you just keep hitting them in the body and they're going to get tired eventually. If they start reaching for it, their defense changes and the stuff that they were ready to defend upstairs is suddenly open. The other one that Max snuck in under that lead elbow was the right body kick, which is, it's a technique that you don't see an awful lot because there's so much risk of it being caught, because it also hits the back and ends up under the opponent's arm. It's not as damaging as a kick on the open side, but if you slot it in at the right time, it can be a very useful kick because it's not something you see all that much. Superlek is very good at it in kickboxing and Muay Thai. But an example of why you wouldn't do it unless you were very confident in your timing would be Paulo Costa when he fought Israel Adesanya. He'd been fighting all these southpaws, so he's throwing right body kicks. They're banging into these guys' bodies. It's hitting their arm or their rib cage, and they're just folding. Then he fights Israel Adesanya, and Adesanya stands orthodox, and he throws the same right body kick. Adesanya takes a little step to take some stank off it, because you either want to stop it early or make it go too far so that it loses some power. So he takes a little step away from the kick, lets it hit him in the back, wraps his arm over, and comes back with a 3-punch combination and drops Costa. And then he did it again later too. So yeah, if you're not good with your timing, the right body kick can be real dangerous. But Max landed some really good ones in this one. And then later, when Gaethje was keeping that elbow down, concerned about the right straight to the body and the right body kick, Holloway would start throwing right high kicks. From very early on, Max Holloway was showing the jab, and as Gaethje ducked to then come back with his right hand across the top, he'd hit him with the uppercut. And the uppercut was a constant feature in this fight. It was a really good weapon in the second Volkanovski fight, but he'd throw the right uppercut to try and catch Gaethje ducking, and then he'd also throw the right uppercut as a lead and follow with the jab, which is something I talk about a lot. Willie Pep used to do it. Jean-Charles Skarbowski did it a lot in Muay Thai, which was very unusual in Muay Thai to throw the right uppercut and then the left jab behind it. But it's a great move because it clears the space between you. You know, it's very unlikely there's going to be a knee or an uppercut coming up if you just thrown your uppercut through that space. But they're also going to be standing straight up. So if they don't get hit with the uppercut, which they probably won't if they see it coming in if you're leading with it, you follow with the jab and you've got a great deal more reach on the jab than you do on the right, or, you know, with your left jab than you do with your right uppercut. So you can snap their head back with a good power jab. And then later in the fight, Holloway landed a couple of right straight to left jab, the old Sergey Kovalev special. Kovalev used to drop people with his jab, and people would go, oh my God, how powerful is he that he drops people with his jab? And then you actually watch his fights, and it's because he's always leading with his right hand as like a fake. He smacks it against their guard, and that coils his shoulders, loads him up, so that basically his left jab is now a left straight. Archie Moore used to call it his left cross. But, you know, you throw your right hand, so you've coiled your shoulders up. You're standing close enough that your right hand is hitting their guard. So you're going to go all the way through their head when you throw your jab. And Holloway landed a couple of those in like round 4 and 5, and they were very cool too. But the body jab was there. Love the body jab. Always a great one from Max. You know, if you need to see that in action, I mean, you've just seen it against Justin Gaethje work a ton, but go watch him do it to Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo's half the reason that we don't do the body jab in MMA, because one time someone tried to body jab him in WEC and he kneed them in the head because he was really good at timing knees back in the day. And consequently, everyone in MMA has always been like, I don't want to body jab because I might get kneed in the head. But Max Holloway came out against Jose Aldo in 2 fights, and by feinting and faking and showing the body jab and not doing it, and then doing the body jab, you know, Jose Aldo doesn't want to be throwing knees as hard as he can at thin air, because then he's out of position. You can come in on him while he's on one leg. He's also tiring himself out. So he'll stop doing it if you show a couple of feints, and then you can start poking him in the body again. Actually, one of Gaethje's best shots in this fight was like body jab and come up with the left hook into the right straight. Justin Gaethje, I mean, I say it every time, but if he just understood how useful the jab is, because he's got a good jab, and he never uses it. It's like, I mean, you know, Cody Garbrandt was also on this card, and that's been the story of his career. It's one thing to realize how good the jab is and not have a good jab, but to be blessed with a good jab, or, you know, to have practiced a good jab in the gym and then just discard it as soon as you get into the fight, that's really frustrating. But there were lots of body kicks as well, front kicks to the body, which is what I'd been asking for in the pre-fight. I liked the idea of front kicking into stance changes, but Holloway didn't really stance switch that much in this fight. But the one that was really surprising here was the right front kick, sort of teep push kick to the front of the thigh, real like strict Muay Thai style, where they don't like you kicking the front of the knee, but you are allowed to teep the thigh. And he'd go whole of the foot on the quad, basically. So heel down towards the knee, toe up towards the hip, and he'd just keep slamming that in, not even slamming it, poking it in, as Gaethje came forward. And you could see Gaethje's hips go back every time, like it being folded in half by this kick. And that one, Bobby Green's teep to the gut, Sean Strickland's teeps throughout his fights, they really go under the radar. People don't notice them, because all that happens when you land one is that the other guy goes, oh, that's annoying. But it really wears on them. And just like with a good oblique kick, if you hit someone with a good teep to the front of the thigh and you push their hips back, they're all out of position. They're going to have a real hard time getting to you with punches immediately afterwards. Try standing in a stance and then straightening your leg and putting your butt back and like leaping forward with the left hook from there. You're not going to get to someone. Whereas, you know, Max's stance in this fight, the legs bent, coiled underneath him. He was already ready to leap in to his boxing combinations. Reminded me kind of Brandon Moreno's stance against Kai Kara France, which I really liked in that fight too. Shortening the stance, but staying bent-legged and coiled. Hard work on your legs, but if you can do it, you got a lovely middle ground between being able to level change and stop takedowns, being able to check kicks or take kicks, and being able to spring forward and start boxing effectively. The other one was the jumping back kick, or just the back kick generally. I mean, I'm going to have to write Advanced Striking 2.0 Max Holloway because he's got so many tricks, but I've talked about this hundreds of times in articles over the years. The back kick, or spinning kicks generally, there are a couple of good times to land them, and then every other time is a terrible time to attempt them. Don't do them chasing people. Don't do them at random out in the middle of the cage. The times to do them are against the cage, when the opponent is very clearly circling one direction into the kick, or when the opponent is coming forwards as an intercepting counter. Those are the times to hit the spinning techniques. When they're along the cage, if they stand still, they're going to get hit with the kick because they can't retreat. You've also got a 50-50 chance because if they step one way or the other, 50% of the time they're going to be moving into the kick. So if they stand still or move in one direction, they eat the kick. If they move the other direction, you miss the kick. But, that's why a lot of the time you want to wait until the guy starts circling and then throw the back kick. That's the second time, when they're circling into the kick. And if you saw a couple of the ones that Max hit out in the open, it was because Gaethje was circling past his lead leg. And then the third one is when they're coming in on you. And Max did it along the fence in the first round. And the thing about these back kicks is great one to study for short range back kicks is Kyokushin karate or knockdown karate of any type, because they exchange punches chest to chest because the body punch is illegal, head punches are illegal, which is a really weird rule set, but it does make these fighters who have these crazy dexterous legs. And the back kick in real close distance is a sort of signature weapon of knockdown karate. So they jump up and they throw it, not like a side kick, but with the knee pointed towards the floor and the leg bent and coiled right up. So you're hitting with your heel, basically underneath your ass, but the heel's hitting them in the liver. And that's the ideal connection. But Gaethje ducked forward, as Max had been exploiting with the uppercut the whole time. And he ate the kick basically down the bridge of his nose, which was a really weird connection, but it broke his nose and messed him up for the rest of the fight. There's been a few weird ones like that, like Uriah Hall versus Mousasi. Eddie Wineland was putting on a great performance against Renan Barão when Renan Barão was champion. And I used that to write, or I used a lot of that to write Killing the King Renan Barão, which then TJ Dillashaw and Dwayne Ludwig, they basically used all the stuff from that, and then they read the article and were like, that was brilliant on Rogan, which was great. But Eddie Wineland was having this storming performance against Renan Barão. And then Renan Barão, like when he was the kind of fighter where if his jab and his low kick weren't working, they were his main weapons, he would attempt a really bad takedown with his head out. And if that wasn't working, he'd back kick. And it was so readable that I pointed it out from this Eddie Wineland fight. And then TJ Dillashaw fought Renan Barão twice, and every time he was ready for the back kick and would jump past it and hit Barão from behind him. But Barão did this back kick against Eddie Wineland, and Eddie Wineland ducks, and the back kick was going into the body, but because Eddie Wineland ducked, it hit him in the chin and knocked him out. And you get this incredible knockout that could never have been planned. But that's fighting, we talked about with Alex Pereira in the main event. Sometimes you hit a guy and it's much better than you thought it would be. But the little jumping back kick, especially when backing up, I really like that. There was a really good example from Anthony Pettis when he was defending the UFC lightweight title against Gilbert Melendez. He hit a lovely one of these. You jump so that you can do the full pivot without being in contact with the floor, so you can do it in a very short space. So you lose a bit of traction with the floor. You don't have the same sort of power as if you were doing the Joe Rogan on the heavy bag sort of step through Kung Lee Express back kick. But you get into position and you land your strike, and if you're landing it as a counter and it's hitting a good place, you've got a great chance of hurting them anyway. It's that trinity of power, placement, and timing. You only need like two of them to really hurt someone badly. I think surprises in this one were how great Max's chin looked. Where in the Dustin Poirier fight, his hands looked like those foam hammers that make the squeaky noise. And when he got hit, he really felt it. And obviously, Dustin Poirier is a different fighter to Justin Gaethje, but Justin Gaethje is one of the hardest hitters in the lightweight division. And he landed some good shots on Holloway here. There was a lovely one where he landed the right hand on the neck, and Holloway takes it and immediately lands the left hook counter and hurts Gaethje. And again, timing and placement more than power. But Gaethje's shot had good timing, placement, and power, and Holloway took it really well. And then, was it third or fourth round, Gaethje lands probably his best connection of the fight, where he does his classic combination. He ducks whatever Holloway's throwing, crashes in shoulder into Holloway's chest, and reaches his left arm behind Holloway's head. And then he just punches towards his left hand. He used to be functionally blind in the cage, and he didn't used to talk about it. It was something that I was watching him going like, he fights a lot like other blind fighters I've seen. Joe Frazier, if you watch him back in the day, by the time that he fought Ali in the Thriller in Manila, he had a cataract in one eye and he was already blind in the other. And you can see it in people like that because they don't they're not reacting to punches ever. You don't want to be when you're moving your head. There needs to be sort of like a degree of head movement in anticipation of the opponent punching to make yourself harder to hit. You don't want to be working entirely on reactions. But you can see when someone is not reacting at all to punches. They're just moving their head constantly, and then if the punch comes in or not, they're like, it's the same. And Justin Gaethje used to be like that, and he used to have his hands out feeling for the guy tons, and all his best connections were he'd grab behind the head and then he'd punch towards his hand, and a lot of the time it'd be a great right uppercut, but he hit Max here with a right hook and stunned him a little bit. But it's always been his best weapon. Duck in, grab the head, punch to the hand. But it would be so much better if he jabbed first, if he just jabbed and dipped and crashed into the guy then. Jab and dip for everyone. I mean, he starts jabbing in like round 3 or 4, and he has some success with it. And this is something I'm always talking about with Duran, Roberto Duran, one of the great boxers of all time, if you're not a regular listener of the podcast or regular viewer of old boxing. But Duran fought some amazing jabbers, and his game was to get inside and hit them with power punches. And power punches are your left hook, your right hand, your right hook, your right straight, your left uppercut, your body shots of both hands, but they're all shorter than the jab, and they're all slower than the jab. So the jab is like whittled down to, if we're going reaction for reaction as fast as possible, the guy with the better jab, if he can keep you on the outside, he's going to have a great time. Duran would be like losing these jabbing battles in terms of landing, but he would be jabbing with the opponent knowing that they'd jab back. So he'd jab and then they'd jab back, or he'd jab and he'd move his head immediately knowing that they'd jab back. He'd jab and duck or jab and dip, and their jab would fly over the top of him, and he'd be inside with their elbows open, smashing their body. Or other times, they'd jab, and then he'd sort of wait a bit, and then he'd jab, and then they'd both wait a bit, and then he knew the opponent would jab because he'd set this little rhythm up, so he knew when to slip and move inside. So even if your jab is not landing and you don't have the faster jab, and your jab is not really that much of a weapon, you can still start dictating when the opponent is going to jab, and get on the inside and hit them with your power punches. It's always good to jab. Like even if your jab is absolute trash, having it out there, if you know when your trash jab is going out, you know when the opponent's going to be trying to counter. But sadly, Justin Gaethje, whose jab is not trash, still will not jab until round 4. But then this is what Holloway had in the Dustin Poirier fight. Didn't go to the body till like round 3, round 4. Has real success there, and you're like, well, if you just started that in round 1 or round 2 even, and it's the same with Justin Gaethje's jab here. There was another great example of that principle we talk about all the time. Holloway's been clipping off 1s and 2s, or 2 punches at a time, jab to the head, right straight to the body, or 1-2 to the head. He does that twice in a row, and then he throws jab right straight to the body, jab right straight, 4 punches, bam, 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 bam. And he chins Justin Gaethje and hurts him. That's until the end of the fight, that's probably the worst he hurt him. And it's something that always seems to work, because so much of like the knockout and being stunned by things, a lot of it is bro science, a lot of it is old wives' tale, but for the fellas. But one of the observable trends is that you tend to get hurt by things that you're not ready for. If something surprises you, that will do more damage to you and your equilibrium and your ability to continue fighting than if you're looking straight at the guy and he punches you in the face and you see it coming the whole time, even if that shot's harder. So the great example I always use is Shane Carwin versus Junior Dos Santos. Junior Dos Santos, massive hitter at heavyweight. Shane Carwin, a massive hitter and could clearly take an enormous blow. He was like, he cut to make 265. He was a 300-pound man. He got caught like having HGH delivered to his house. But he was terrifying. And Dos Santos was hitting him as hard as he could. Dos Santos, body jabs, right straight to the body, setting up the big overhand. That was his big move. He'd jab the body, right straight to the body, and then he'd level change and throw the overhand across the top with like a straight arm, and he'd hit you with his wrist right behind the neck. And Shane Carwin was taking these shots. And then in the third round, Junior Dos Santos throws 1-2, 3-2. And Shane Carwin has been so used to like taking 2 punches and trying to come back that he walks straight on to the 3-2 immediately afterwards and gets stunned. Changing up rhythm, changing up volume, really important to hurting people or stunning people. And then we can get into like the aspects of what makes the knockout shot as we talk about the end of the fight, which was absolutely crazy. Max Holloway had come out and he'd put on a blinder. I think he won every round, or maybe Gaethje won one. I know one judge had it like even going into the 5th, and you're going, really? But he'd put on an amazing performance. He'd outclassed Gaethje in basically almost every round. He'd been hit very little, and even if he got hit clean, he took it like effortlessly. And he'd hurt this much bigger puncher. And then in the last 10 seconds of the fight, he does the thing that he did against Ricardo Lamas, who is not a big hitter and not scary like that. Where he points into the centre of the cage, he goes, let's swing. But he did it to the biggest hitter in the division, and then he stopped him and slumped him on his face in the last second of the fight. It was crazy. And tactically, probably the dumbest thing you could do if you're winning the fight already by beautiful decision. Career-wise, honestly, a very smart thing to do. The talk was previously, what's Max Holloway got left? Volkanovski beat him 3 times. He's never getting that fight again. Ilia Topuria doesn't want to fight him, this, that, and the other. He's doing this weird fight at lightweight where he didn't look good last time. And now the conversation is, damn, that dude should be fighting Islam Makhachev because he just scored the best knockout of all time over a guy who just knocked out the guy who Makhachev's about to fight. Or if he goes down to featherweight again, or easy title shot because he just beat the number 1 contender in the weight class above by knockout. But even in that crazy exchange at the end, he gets in, he goes to the body, and then he comes up to the head again. And Gaethje's like reaching down to deal with the body shots. And Gaethje, mouth open because he's been breathing through his nose from early on. Eyes have been closed by, let's admit it, a couple of eye pokes and a ton of jabs. So, perfect time to throw away the fight if you do something stupid like right at the end of the fight. But also, perfect time to stop someone if they've got an iron head most of the time. And then, end of round 5 is going to be when they're most vulnerable. So I'll never say it was a good idea to step in and trade with Justin Gaethje when you've already sealed the fight. But I could understand if Max Holloway had felt his, he's been being hit by him intermittently throughout the fight. If he's felt his power in the 5th round and he said, you know what, this isn't hurting me anymore. And I'm cracking him basically any time I want to. And he said, okay, let's try and knock him out. Then respect to him for that. But it did turn what was, going to be remembered by people like me as one of the all-time great game plans and performances into what is now going to be remembered as one of the great fights of all time and one of the great finishes of all time by everyone, or everyone in this niche sport. And then someone put the belt on him, but he went over and gave it to Mark Coleman instead anyway. What a legend. If you've not been keeping up with the Mark Coleman stuff, first UFC heavyweight champion, moved from the tournament structure to the heavyweight title structure. Great fighter back in the day, had trouble learning submissions and striking and things like that. Wasn't great in the all-rounded sense, but very scary fighter back in the day. But he's been in and out of hospital basically every other week for the last 5 years. He's had multiple hip replacements. His spine's ruined. He can barely walk. And yet his dog woke him in the night because his house was on fire. His parents were in the house, who, must be 80 or 90 now. And he carried them both out and ran back in and passed out from smoke inhalation, trying to save his dog. So, absolute legend. Choking up even recounting that story, but it was great to see him there and getting his props. And there was another storyline there too, because he came out with his daughters holding hands with him, which was very sweet. But they're now the age that he was when he was getting beaten up by Fedor Emelianenko and brought them into the ring to meet the guy who'd just beaten their dad up, which is one of the strange scarring moments in MMA. But in a weird way, you can sort of understand, because he was like, don't be scared of this man. He's just a guy, and he was just doing his job. And quite touching in a weird way. But these little girls were so traumatized at the time. Co-main event, Jose Aldo, Jonathan Martinez, banger. Jose Aldo, older than ever, but aren't we all? 37 years old, looking like a bloody walnut out there. Wrinkles on his bald head. Fights Jonathan Martinez, tricky young up-and-comer. I always say on this podcast, whenever Jonathan Martinez comes up, or whenever we're talking about fighters that a young fighter should look at, or Jonathan Martinez does everything well. Starting to gain a bit of aura, because he stopped a couple of guys with low kicks, Cub Swanson and Adrian Yanez. I said, that'll be interesting, seeing how he deals without the low kicks if Jose Aldo starts checking them. And he didn't deal very well at all. He had that thing where at the end of the fight ended with him in closed guard bottom. Aldo got off him and he rolled over and slammed his fists on the floor, and he looked very upset. And it was the exact same look on the face of Pedro Munoz when he was the up-and-coming hot stuff at bantamweight, and he met Jose Aldo, and he couldn't do anything. And afterwards, he went over to Aldo, and he was like, "You're the greatest, man." And, I think the interesting thing for me here is that Jose Aldo, the checking of kicks was something that I was really intrigued by. I joked about it beforehand, saying, what happens when Martinez throws the kick as hard as he can to the inside of Jose Aldo's lead leg, and Aldo checks. Does his shin smash into a million little pieces? There was always the possibility of that happening, but I never thought that Martinez was the kind of dummy to go out there and just throw full power kicks all the time against a guy who has proven himself one of the best kick checkers in MMA. But what does he do when he can't kick as often and doesn't get those devastating results off each kick? Because if he's not kicking as hard, when he does land, it's not going to mean as much. And it was a little bit similar to what you saw from Chris Gutierrez, his teammate, when he pooped the bed against Song Yadong. And he just couldn't throw a hard kick. And that was due to the fear of being countered, because Song Yadong steps down the inside of people very well. There's a number of knockdowns and a couple of knockouts he's had in the UFC where he's taken the low kick, stepped in on it, and thrown the left hook and hit the guy on one leg and knocked him out. Or knocked him down and followed up. So Gutierrez without low kicks was kind of unimpressive, and Martinez without low kicks was also kind of unimpressive. Lots of stuff I want to talk about with Aldo from this fight. But he wasn't checking the kicks off the bat. Martinez was catching him early. And he was doing very well with a little step-up outside low kick and then throwing the inside low kick, because you've got to turn your shin to angle into the kick. And these are kicks above the knee, by the way. We're not talking about calf kicks right now, but you've got to turn your shin out into the kick to take the kick. You don't want to be... Like, if you pick your leg up to check an inside kick and they throw an outside kick, you're going to get hit in the calf anyway, where we don't want to get hit nowadays in MMA. Great example would be from Muay Thai, or, 4-ounce Muay Thai, so nerds will get mad about it, but Nongo fought Liam Harrison. Both guys with hundreds of fights of experience in Muay Thai. Liam Harrison knows how to check a kick. And Nongo fakes the kick, steps out to the right. Liam Harrison's picked his leg up to check, and Nongo throws the kick from slightly off to his right. So the kick wraps around behind and hits Harrison in the calf, basically, while he's on one leg. So you don't want to be taking ones like that. And by going inside and out, switching those playing those two kicks off each other, Martinez could have Aldo trying to play catch-up. And it was quite similar to what Gutierrez does. He uses a teep to the lead leg and an inside low kick with his rear leg. So I think he's southpaw. Maybe he's orthodox. But yeah, he has power kick with his rear leg, teep to the lead leg, and that gets the guy, keeps the guy guessing. So early going, Aldo can't check any of these kicks. And you want to check kicks, because if you check kicks... if you checked a kick and then the guy went back to kicking as hard as possible all the time, you would miss a couple of kicks and you'd get hurt. But that's not how fighting works. As soon as you start checking hard kicks from the opponent, they ease up on those kicks, or they stop throwing them as much, because they don't want to hurt themselves. So Aldo wants this guy to kick his shin, or he wants to jam his shin into the path of the kick, rather. So midway through that first round, Jose Aldo throws a hard right high kick onto Martinez's arm, and wouldn't you know it, Martinez goes, "Oh, no, I'm not having that," and comes back with a low kick, and he gets teeped in the standing leg while on one leg and falls over. And then Jose Aldo throws a right kick to the inside of Martinez's lead right leg, and Martinez comes back with his own inside low kick, because that's his move, and Aldo checks it. And then for the rest of the fight, Martinez is a lot less dangerous with those kicks. And that wasn't Aldo making a fantastic read. That was Aldo going out and kicking that guy to get kicks back. And it works so well. It works so well. I mean, if you watch any stadium Muay Thai or anything like that, or someone like Sanshai, someone like him. There's no one like him. But if you watch someone who likes catching kicks and throwing people off those kicks, like Sanshai, what he does first is he kicks. He kicks you so that you kick back. Very simple psychology, but also, it's the sensible thing to do in many regards, because if they're kicking you and they land on your arm, they're in kicking range. They're in kicking range. Just as if they punch you and they land on your lead shoulder or your guard, that they're in punching range. So that was how Aldo got those early checks in, started dissuading or deterring Martinez from throwing the powerful low kicks. And then it started to get more boxy, and Jose Aldo's been working on his boxing lots, obviously, because he took, I think it's 3 boxing matches since leaving the UFC. And there was talk about, the UFC not being happy with that, and him trying to get out of his contract by fighting out his contract here. I don't know about that. Jonathan Martinez before the fight was saying Aldo's heart isn't in it and whatever. And obviously Aldo looked like trash on the scales, because he always does. And then he fights, just like usual Aldo. But I don't know what's going on with Aldo's contract and his boxing and stuff. I think the case is probably, and this is just a guess, but the fight was put together fairly surprisingly. So I would guess that they didn't have a decent enough headliner for UFC 301 in Rio de Janeiro. So they wanted another big Brazilian on the card. There aren't really that many big Brazilians. I mean, they've done their best with like Michel Pereira's coming up, Caio Borralho's coming up, but Jose Aldo's the man, so they stuck him on the card, and they probably offered him a load of money to do it. You would think if they're comfortably letting him box, they would have to offer him a bit more than usual to come back and do this. But whatever his reasons, he's been boxing recently. Only 6-rounders. If he were doing full 8-rounder, 10-rounders, that would be very interesting because his cardio has always been a bit of a problem, and his output has always, through even his prime when he was an absolute specimen athletically, his output has always been a bit on the low side. But the interesting thing about the boxing is that you have to throw punches through the full 6 rounds. There's no taking a break. I mean, he did it in this fight when he got tired in the third. He just hit a double leg and laid on top. But there's no taking a break in boxing. You have to keep throwing hands for 6 full rounds or 8 full rounds or 10 full rounds, whatever you're signed for. And I was quite intrigued to see how that affected his performance here. I will say I was really impressed by his volume. And, I wax lyrical about Jose Aldo a lot, but Aldo as an old man has impressed me much more than Aldo in his prime. Before he fought Frankie Edgar the first time, he didn't even really have a jab. And then he just developed one of the best jabs in the sport. And that was the case with Jose Aldo. He kept adding things, and he fell in love with boxing, and it meant that he moved away from his low kicks and his knees. The knees were back for this one, loved them. But he's kind of got going on what Fedor had going on, where he fell in love with boxing, and that's what kept him motivated to keep training for MMA. And with Fedor, obviously, it worked out quite badly, jumping into triangles, not looking that good on the mat, not looking that good in the clinch anymore. But with Aldo, I'm genuinely impressed by some of the stuff that's happened. And what really impressed me in this fight, having not watched his boxing matches, which people tell me he didn't look great in, but what really impressed me in this fight was how he was moving with his punches. Because Jose Aldo, if you think back to Jose Aldo's fights, there's been lots of occasions where he covers or slips or whatever the opponent's attack, and he throws back with big counters. Right straight, left hook to the body, right hook to the body, left hook to the body, those ones. Think of his big body shots and things like that they always show in slow-mo after the fights. A lot of those punches, he's sort of falling forward onto his lead foot for, and then his head's over his lead foot, and he doesn't really have anywhere to go. He can't really follow the guy, he can't really move across the floor without exposing himself. And even obviously the Conor McGregor example is a great one where he squares up and leaps forward with the left hook, and everything's ahead of his feet. But even the Pedro Munoz fight, the Marlon Vera fight, go back and watch his body shots, how he throws himself onto the lead leg and he really leans forward and he's punching the guy and he's sort of falling downwards all the time, falling downwards and forwards. In this fight, I was really impressed by how he always took his feet with him and he was always on top of his feet. So from the early going, he's throwing, he's fighting a southpaw, so he's trying to throw the left hook behind the lead hand and make ground because the guy's going to back off. Martinez is going to kick and back off all the time. So he's throwing left hook and he's bouncing his feet up at the same time, and then right straight, left hook, right straight. I mean, he's throwing 4 punch combinations to the head, not banging the body 3 times as the guy stands still in place. He's throwing 4 punches and moving across the floor, and he's not leaning ahead of himself. And that really impressed me. That's a massive improvement in boxing form. Or when he threw his right straight at Martinez's body, he threw it and his feet both moved towards Martinez and he changed level a bit. He didn't step forward with his right foot. He didn't step forward with his left foot, fall onto it, throw a right straight while his body's angled forward, his head 2 feet in front of his hips, and then try and come up or step back. He was on top of his feet the whole time. It really impressed me and it really bothered Martinez. And I think I was trying to think of other southpaws that Aldo's fought recently. Certainly striking southpaws. Dvalishvili's orthodox, Font is orthodox, Munoz is orthodox, Marlon Vera switches and doesn't really do anything, Jan is orthodox, Moraes is orthodox, Volkanovski switches but is mainly orthodox, Moicano is orthodox, Jeremy Stevens I believe is orthodox, Max Holloway switches, Frankie Edgar's orthodox, Conor McGregor. And there we are, back at the one big southpaw where he lunged ahead of himself. And it's quite easy to do against southpaws to start reaching ahead of yourself, especially if you're leading with the right hand, or you're throwing the right hand out as a fake to square up and throw the left hook afterwards. This one was a great, this fight in some regards, obviously not the same fighter at all, but because of the rangy southpaw who moves back, and certainly kicks and moves back and tries to draw you forward, or just get away. This was sort of like correcting some errors. So I really enjoyed that. He brought back the knees, which honestly, great to see as an old school Aldo head, because he won the WEC belt back in like 2008 with knees. That's what he was known for. That was before the low kick. Even the low kick's like Uriah Faber time. But I'd honestly say the knees in this fight were some of the shots that got him caught. Because he had to get up on one leg, he threw the knee, and he often didn't connect with Martinez's head. And Martinez would come back with punches and catch him on one leg or coming down from one leg. Martinez had a couple of moments. A couple of times he landed his left straight to back Aldo up a little bit, and then he landed his left body kick underneath Aldo's elbow. And I think it was in the second round that Aldo then circled past Martinez's lead leg, and Martinez threw the back fist and just sort of like grazed Aldo's chin. Honestly, the back fist was probably a good shout and something they probably worked for, because Aldo loves to slip off to the left and then pivot around his left foot. You would expect him to do that even more against the southpaw every time they come in. So letting him go out of the left side and then hitting him with the back fist on the way out the door, good shout. Think of Kyoji Horiguchi getting knocked out by Sergio Pettis. I often do before I go to sleep, and I have a little weep. But I wanted to praise the volume and the work rate and the moving his feet with it and staying on balance. I thought that was beautiful. The distance he was covering, because he also showed a little bit of the old Aldo stuff, which was like the Rob Font performance. If in doubt, just crack him, because he threw an uppercut left hook, dinged Martinez and wobbled him up. And then in the third, he'd wobbled Martinez and he runs up on him like he's about to start swinging. And clearly it's third round and Aldo's actually getting a bit tired. So he bends over at the waist, grabs Martinez, locked hands under the button, just throws him to the mat. It was the most Big Brother-esque takedown you've ever seen. But then he digs his knees in to get to full guard or to closed guard. And he goes, right, you're not getting up now and you're not going to hurt me from here and you're never submitting me. And you could see Martinez getting really frustrated. And then when the bell went, he was just like, fuck, I've blown it. Got to be a very frustrated. I mean, you see it a lot in fights, but guys who are losing on the cards and then they get taken down in the third round and they just can't get back up. And you get that like last minute or two where they're going, well, what can I get going from my back? I'm not going to submit this person. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be able to push a triangle through if they're just keeping their elbows in and hands in my biceps and then hitting me with short elbows. But a great performance from Aldo. He's slowing down physically, and some of the shots that I saw him take in this one sort of gave him a pause in the way that he just would have walked through in his youth. But he is so much a better fighter now in terms of skill than he was during his prime. They always say like, oh, as an older fighter, you're losing your physical edge, so you've got to develop these. You've got to develop the technique and the strategies and the tactics. And Aldo, more than anyone, represents that. And this is a sport where that can be, that can carry you for a very long time. Anderson Silva was out of his physical prime long before what we would consider like his best years in the UFC. His physical prime was like his Pride run and Cage Rage, and then he just gets better and better technically and starts coming up with better plans, fighting on the back foot, drawing people forward. That was all later era Silva. Had he been doing it back in Pride, well, they probably wouldn't have signed him to too many fights. I don't know if they'd have liked it. But, this is a sport where athleticism is still a massive part of it. But you have so many approaches. And so much of it is misdirection and tactics. And, of course, the addition of the knockout and the submission mean that you only have to outsmart the guy once if you get it right. Because if we were playing five-a-side football or five-a-side basketball or whatever, and you hit your trick play and you get a point, and then you just get stomped for the rest of the game. If you do that trick play and you score your point in MMA, you might just finish the fight and not have to deal with this person again. Come up with a trick play for the next time you have to fight them. Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Sergey Spivak of waiting till the next day, starting at the end and watching these fights back. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast. We're coming at you following UFC 311. And it was one I was very excited about. I wrote a big article called Lessons from Makhachev versus Sarukian 1. I released a boycast on it. I released a preview for the boycast called Makhachev versus Sarukian. Now that's what I call a fight. And then the fight fell through. The fight fell through a couple of hours before the weigh-ins, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, I was chatting to some people at a party, and I was just explaining. They were saying, "What's it like covering fighting?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you what can happen in this sport. One day before the event, you have to change all the advertising material for the event." John Anik did an interview where he said, "Now I'm going to be up all night recording new lines for the promo pieces and the stuff that plays during the undercard and so on." Obviously, drop in the bucket in terms of what the UFC's making money-wise, but a lot of work gets thrown out, and a lot of work has to be done again in the last minute. So it's never ideal for anyone, not ideal for Makhachev or Moicano. I mean, Moicano gets a great opportunity there, but both of them trained for someone else entirely. Moicano definitely got more to win than he had to lose, and Makhachev actually had some risk attached to this. But really, we just lost a really interesting matchup. However, I felt like we gained a really interesting matchup. I said that when it happened, and I don't think Makhachev winning makes that any less true. It was still an interesting matchup. This is the thing, Makhachev's the best guy in the world. If he beats someone, I still wanted to see him beat them if they were a good fighter. We're in this stage of Makhachev where it's like Prime Anderson Silva, where people almost don't want to see the fights. They're like, well, he'd just easily win. It's like, no, man, I want to watch him win. That's why I do this. Unless you're just looking at the numbers and gambling on it and not really paying attention to the fights, you probably want to see Makhachev smash some top lightweights. And Moicano was on a really good run, which makes smashing him all the more impressive. So why don't we start there? Because it was quite a quick fight. There was a classic Makhachev slipped. While something about Moicano that I like in his boxing is that he throws counter combinations, which is something that even in decent levels of boxing, coaches go crazy about their fighters not doing enough. If you watch Moicano versus Riddell, who else did he crack on the counter? He might have actually done it against Jalen Turner, of all people. But when his boxing can look pretty slick, and I've said that, he's in his Maia phase. Damian Maia actually built some serviceable striking and then got too comfortable showing it off and went back to just an ultra wrestling heavy game plan of, I'm going to grapple people, that's what I'm good at, stick to what I'm good at. Which was interesting because most fighters are constantly trying to round themselves out and end up losing a bit of prowess in their, in the thing that got them famous while doing that. But Moicano's boxing can look quite good. He's a bit vulnerable on the feet, is what I'd say, but when he sees the punches coming, or he can avoid the punches, or he's on offense, all very good. So Makhachev lanced him with a left straight, threw another one later on, and Moicano threw back 3 or 4 punches in a row, and Makhachev was off balance and slipped, which can happen if you see the punch coming, but you're off balance and you try and avoid it anyway. You can end up falling over. And we got the standard, oh, he's hurt! But they very quickly realised he wasn't, the commentary team. On the feet, this was very conservative Makhachev, who's always conservative anyway. He's not getting into brawls with people, with the exception of the Poirier fight. He's very measured. He's a sharpshooter on the feet. Then he shot low and long, hit Moicano's hips and ran up into what I've heard called a dresser dump or a trap hook dump, where you've picked up one leg and instead of being able to get to the other leg, normally because the opponent blocks you with their arm, your other arm comes up and you basically clothesline them in the neck with your other arm. And you'll see guys go one way and then come back the other and try and turn the opponent like a big steering wheel. But Makhachev was able to just club him straight to the mat. Dom Cruz was good at that too, I think. And GSP is another great example. Go to YouTube and type in all GSP takedowns. There'll be a highlight. He does it a few times in that. But this one got me thinking about sequencing of techniques, which is something you see really good grapplers, either on purpose or by accident through unintentional synergies. They find themselves doing this. But if you watch the very best finishers among the best grapplers in the world, one move flows into the next. All their favorite moves land them into halfway into the next one. which sounds like just that sounds like something that all grappling is. But so let's take, for example, someone like Roger Gracie, famous for smashing his way into half guard, getting the crossface of death, the shoulder of justice, which is where you grab the head and you turn their chin away from you with your shoulder. He would use that to sneak his knee through from the half guard and mount. And as he tried to mount, the opponent would try and push his knee back into their guard, and he'd underhook that arm and walk it up and be in mount with the underhook on the arm, which means that you haven't just mounted and then the guy gets his elbows down and he's defending the mount now. You've mounted in position to start attacking. Arm triangles, collar choke, cross collar chokes is what Roger Gracie used to do in the gi. He was really good at the Ezekiel. But opening the guy's elbows from mount is key to that. So his passing game landed him halfway to finishing from the mount, rather than he passed and then he was in mount and he was like, right, let's get to work from mount. Another example would be someone like GSP, hit his double leg, flared the opponent and landed in half guard with the underhook ready to start crossface underhook passing. And the way that you see it is that you go, how did he manage to choke him so easily from mount or get his back so easily from there? And you go back and you go, oh, he already had his arm in position because he finished his last move ready to start his next move, which is something that is missing in a lot of fights. Guys pass guard and then they go, right, what am I doing now? And they just like reset to standard side control position or standard mount position. So Makhachev, when he hit this trap hook, clothesline, whatever you want to call it, this takedown, he already had his arm around Moicano's head and applying the crossface, which is halfway into passing from half guard into mount or side control, or looking for the Kimura, which Makhachev is probably his favourite move from top side control and top half guard. Moicano spent the time trying to fight his hands inside of that crossface, and he did in fact peel it off at one point. And this is where it got interesting. I've been saying for a while, I want to watch people turn off the fence against good cage wrestlers, whether it's Makhachev, Chimaev, whoever. Too many guys are going to the wall walk and then just getting stalled out in the wall walk or slowly giving up opportunities. Whereas guys have had success out in the open making stuff happen. So way back in the day, Makhachev fought Mansour Barnui, who had a lot of success out in the open. That was in a ring, to be fair. But then Mansour Barnui fought Shamil Zavarov, who's from Khabib's camp. He's one of the older guys there, one of the guys who had success before Khabib and Islam. And he had a ton of success turning himself off the fence and sweeping Zavarov out in the open or wrestling up from there. Sarukian, in the first, well, I suppose at the moment only fight between Makhachev and Sarukian, he had success out in the open on the mat, on the bottom, scrambling up and using butterfly hooks and things. When he started to wall walk later on, he was just getting stuck there. So there are guys who've had success out in the open and not had success wall walking. There's Volkanovski's an interesting one because he had success wall walking by doing it slightly differently, but that's for another day. So it was interesting watching Moicano turn himself off the fence in this one. I know he is subscribed to the YouTube channel, so I'll take credit for this one where he got submitted. But it did work. He turned off the fence and he got his knees and feet in front of Makhachev, pushed him away, and then he started to sit up. And that's like, yeah, okay, great position, start wrestling up. But he got caught with a little snap down, crumpled over into Das, which is like, I think a lot of people treat that as like, every time anyone ever attempts to kick out and stand up against Makhachev now, they're getting darsed. But this was just exceptional timing on Makhachev's part, and Moicano came up with his head low, a little bit stooped over, and once you get snapped down, it's quite hard. If you're out of position, it's quite hard to fight it back, which is what's so great about the darst stuff. But a lot of discussion about Makhachev's darst because he didn't used to do it much, and now he's submitted 2 guys in a row with it, which is quite interesting. One of the things that I've always admired about Makhachev is that he's constantly working and improving, and he's so different. Like there's a lot of stuff that stayed the same, but he's so different to how he was a few years ago. And he manages to not lose things. He manages to just sort of gain new bits and pieces without forgetting who he is, which is the really hard bit. Especially if a lot of these guys are trying to round themselves out, but a lot of these guys just find new things to do because they're bored, because this is a job that you're doing 24/7. Well, not 24/7, but you're doing 7 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever. You're in training, wrestling, sparring constantly. So people pick up new things because they desperately need something to do. But Makhachev's darts is very interesting. It's he uses a short arm darts that I've heard called a hobbit darts, and I quite like that. I think Jeremy Skinner called it a hobbit darts, but it's for people with short arms. If you can't lock your hand at the bicep like a rear naked choke grip, you lock it over the bottom of the forearm. Just, the forearm down by the elbow. Or is that the top of the forearm? Whatever. There's a couple of other like mechanical details that are quite interesting in Makhachev's dance. If you watch against Poirier, he traps the leg and he falls behind Poirier's head and crumples Poirier's head over sideways, which is effectively a Japanese necktie, which is a different kind of front headlock submission. But he has the arms figure forward for a D'Arce grip. So it goes down as a D'Arce, but it could be a Japanese necktie because it's mainly the sideways head crank. But this one looked a lot more like when the D'Arce was catching on. There were two sort of ways it was catching on. There was a guy called Joe D'Arce who trained with John Danaher, and he started doing it in no-gi. But there was also a gi move where you unravel the opponent's lapel and pass it across him, and you essentially do the same thing as a D'Arce but one-handed, and that was called a brabo choke, which apparently means savage in Portuguese. And some Brazilian guys developed that into the D'Arce choke we know because it was taking a gi technique and trying to make it work in no gi. So Leo Vieira was very good at that, the brabo choke. And if you watch Robert Drysdale's old DVDs back in the day, just after he won ADCC, he's a really interesting character, Drysdale. He does a load of work on the history of jiu-jitsu now, but I was really excited for his UFC career, but then he kept testing positive before he'd even had a fight. And this was in the days before any sort of real testing. But the way that he teaches the D'Arce, which is very interesting if you can find those old DVDs, a lot of guys want to get their arm as deep as possible, hug the bicep, bring everything tight, sprawl on the guy, squeeze the life out of him. Drysdale's like, no, I want the ridge of my wrist just below my thumb on their occipital. So like if you feel the back of your head, where it sort of goes in towards the back of your neck. So look at your hand, look at your thumb, follow it down to the knuckle of the thumb, then follow it down to the wrist to about where the strap of your watch would sit. You want that on the back of their occipital, and then you lock your hands and you, instead of sprawling on them, you pull your elbow up. So the bone just digs into the back of the head. And Drysdale put people to sleep with that, so it's a legit choke, but he was really stressing that the idea that it's just supposed to hurt people, and that seems to be what Makhachev did on this one and is doing. As people have pointed out rightly, the guys he's tapping out they're not tapping out like, oh, I'm about to go to sleep, go on then. They're tapping out like they're in a lot of pain and worried about being injured. So another sensational performance from Makhachev, undeniably, not just the best guy in the world, one of the best fighters I've ever seen skill-wise. We raised some questions about his resume because he does have two fights. When it comes to like getting the record for defending the lightweight title, two of those defenses will be against a featherweight and so on. People are like trying to pretend that this is the same as that he got number 7 ranked lightweight instead of number 2 ranked lightweight, but it's still a world-class lightweight who's been fighting at lightweight and proving himself at lightweight. But yes, Makhachev's the man.
Let's talk Jiri versus Glover. Fucking amazing fight. What everyone should be talking about right now. Just fantastic. Prochazka focusing on a lot of up jabs, uppercuts, upward knees. I mean, most knees are upwards, except Tony Jaa style knees where you jump above the opponent's head and bring your knee down. But I've never seen that in a real fight yet. And speaking of Tony Jaa, back up elbows. So yeah, he was focusing a lot of his offense on coming up the middle and punishing level changes. And the cool part about that was that Glover Teixeira just took the punch or the kick or the knee in the face and then still picked up the leg. What a fucking legend. I mean, Glover Teixeira, I'll always remember that the CME boys described my article pre-John Jones Glover Teixeira as a hit piece because I just pointed out that Glover Teixeira only does two things. It's try and time the counter overhand into the left hook and then duck on the single leg. And, he's never really developed any other leads on the feet. And he's never really changed it, even up to this point. It's still overhand left hook, single leg. However, by having an old man game from when he was about 30, he has mastered the mechanics of being an old man. So yeah, it's a bit one note, but he's still bloody good at it. If you watch those single legs in the first round where he's doing little run the pipe moves and then swinging the leg all the way up to his shoulder, so the Jiri's basically in the standing splits. Perfection. Key on a single leg, generally get the leg as high as possible. And then you've got a great chance of the guy just falling over on his own. You don't really need a technical finish. You just need to run through it. But what I was talking about before this fight, and I posted a clip to Twitter saying this, was, people remember Jiri for the amazing knockouts in the last two, but in the Dominic Reyes one, Reyes took him down, got to half guard, was passing to Mount, doing Glover Teixeira's favourite pass. Glover Teixeira's ground game is single leg to get top position, open the guard with like a can opener and some ground and pound, move to half guard, underhook and crossface, pass to Mount, and then kill them from there with the arm triangle and just ground and pound. And Reyes against Jiri got that underhook and crossface from half guard, started passing, left too much room, and then Jiri opened his own legs to encourage Reyes to go to Mount. And as he goes to Mount, Jiri bucks and rolls him over, which is something you can't do if the guy's got a good underhook and crossface and he's turning your head away, because you would be bridging into basically straining your own neck. And believe me, we're going to be talking about bridging mechanics a lot because of how the fight ended. But I said basically on Twitter, if you want some hope for Glover, because we were all feeling very pessimistic because of how he'd been taking beatings in his last four before Jan Blachowicz, he doesn't make mistakes from there. And in this fight you saw, he is so good there. And he's so good once he gets the mount too. The mount, Craig Jones has some interesting thoughts on like the mount and side control and stuff, because the scoring of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu prioritizes those positions because that was at the time the best. Or if someone mounts you, they'll just beat you to death with their fists. And more and more in MMA, you see guys able to survive mount just by bucking their hips, kicking their knee into the back of the opponent to force them forward onto their hands. And then when the opponent comes forward onto their hands, you grab around their waist and you hide your head in their dick. And you've seen those fights where guys are trying to push the guy off their crotch and land one good punch before they suck themselves back in again. Glover Teixeira is one of about 3 people in the world who's actually a killer from mount and with ground and pound from there. It's him and Lyndon Vassell, who I mentioned quite a lot, but Lyndon Vassell, very bad a lot of places, but when he gets mount, he murders people. So it was very bad for Jiri that he got mounted in round 1, which was not great. But the coolest moment, there were so many cool moments, but one of the coolest things I saw in this fight was that Glover starts smashing Jiri from top of mount. And if you read my Combat Jiu-Jitsu and the State of Grappling in MMA article from last week, which is available to everyone, so go and read it. It's on the Fight Primer. We were talking about like three-quarter mount, which is mount where the opponent has one of your ankles trapped between their legs. And in jiu-jitsu, that's still got work to do because he's very near pushing me back to half guard. In MMA, that's the same as mount because you just punch them, and the punches are exactly the same as from mount. It just means that they're squeezing your ankle. That's about it. And normally when you start punching them, they let go of the ankle so that they can get flat to their back and start bridging and stuff. So Jiri started trying to escape by putting Glover back into three-quarter mount, and then Glover just punched him in the head. And so Jiri put his double forearm, like double elbows up, and just rolled straight to his back and just covered up. And of course, when you do that, Glover Teixeira is going to smash his chest down, start separating one arm, pushing it up, elbow by your head, and grabbing the arm triangle, the katagatame, as it used to be called. It's such a great... In judo, there's like a rule about head and arm chokes, but the katagatame is considered a pin, but you put the person to sleep with the pin, so they're going to be pinned. It's one of those ones like how they go, the kimura is supposed to break the elbow. Shoulder locks are illegal, but kimuras are allowed because they're supposed to break the elbow. I've seen an awful lot of kimuras, and most of them fuck the shoulder before they fuck the elbow. But anyway, Glover smashes his chest down on Jiri as Jiri's got his forearms up, and he starts walking that elbow up. And that, if you've ever grappled, your elbow being walked up past your shoulder and towards your head is the worst feeling in the world because you're so weak pulling it down, and they're just going to keep pushing their weight behind it. And I was going, this is problematic for Jiri. And then the elbow that's being walked up is next to the fence. So he takes the point of his elbow and he puts it in one of the links in the fence. And Glover walks his head out right to the point of the elbow and is pushing as hard as he can, and he can't move it. So he gives up for a minute, throws some punches, Jiri covers up again, he smashes down on the arm, tries it again, Jiri pops his elbow back in the fence. It was incredible. I've never seen that done before. And I believe it's legal because the legality of holding the fence is the I think the rules specifically say no grabbing of the fence with the fingers or toes. Can't really grab with the point of your elbow, but he did put it in the fence and stop himself from getting arm triangle, which was dope. There was loads of other cool stuff on the ground. You saw Glover, when he was on top of side control, he was using what's sometimes called like a wrestler's side control or a catch wrestling side control, which is where you're in the top of side control and you have one arm between their legs. Like in pro wrestling, where they hook the leg for the pin and they go 1, 2, oh, he kicked out. Actually, that was a bit of an early kick out. That's a real Hulk Hogan dick move. You've got to wait until almost 3. But he was using that sort of like hook the leg side control, and what that's really good for, it's really bad for if you've got guys who love throwing up triangles, because they'll try and push your head down between their legs because you've already got one arm in there, and then they'll try and triangle their legs and upside down triangle choke you. But if you've got a guy who's going to try and explode to his knees or turn into you, underhooking that leg, firstly, really makes it hard for him, and secondly, really slows him down. So there were moments where Jiri was able to turn to his knees because he's fucking strong, and Glover was able to slow him down enough to start trying to run around to his back. Again, wrote about all the cool transitions in this fight in my article. There was a gorgeous sucker drag from Glover Teixeira, which is an arm drag when you failed on a shot. The other guy sprawled out on top of you, and it was Jiri going for an anaconda choke in this case, and Glover hit a sucker drag and came out on Jiri's back. There was a beautiful peek out. Shades of Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira there. Obviously, Jiri escaped from deep in an arm triangle, which is crazy, because that's hard to do against people like your own weight. I mean, they're probably about the same weight, but that's hard to do against people your own weight who are a bit worse than you. Let alone was it the 4th round he hit that against a guy who, I'm not being facetious here when I sometimes I'm criticizing him when I'm saying he's such a minimalist, but sometimes I'm just saying, like, Glover Teixeira got to ADCC. Glover Teixeira has competed with guys like Roberto Cyborg Abreu at ADCC, the best grappler in the world at the time. Did fine, didn't get submitted. I think he lost like a decision. But he's done it with this bare bones game that all leads to the arm triangle. So if he gets his arm triangle on you, that should be you done. And Jiri managed to perform that gorgeous turn your own wrist down like you're Kimura-ing yourself and rolling over your shoulder to make the escape happen. Incredible stuff. If you want to see more about that escape, I think Firas Zahabi put up a really good video about it a few years ago. I have seen a clip of Imanari, I think, doing it in a real fight or a real grappling match and going straight into an armbar from it. But yeah, it's tricky. It's hard to do against even okay guys. But that tells me, for all the samurai bullshit, which we'll get into in a minute, but all the samurai bullshit, Jiri and his team have been preparing for this man well. Because in the first round, his elbow going in the cage when Glover was trying to walk it up, all his work mitigating damage from the top of mount, him working at his ring position. The wall walk, he didn't have much success with it. He gave up his back in the first round, and Glover pulled him back into like a teabag Kimura position, which the crowd went wild for. And I was like, we're in Singapore. Wow, cross-culturally hilarious, the north-south teabag Kimura. But something that we talked about before with especially guys like Habib and Islam, Usman, people like that, who are very good at controlling you when you're sitting on the fence trying to build up. We talked about turning yourself off the fence and letting them pass your guard even to do that. And Jiri, I mean, I don't think he let Glover pass his guard, but when he ended up on the bottom, his feet were always looking for the fence. And you saw in the end, he used the bridge off the fence to turn over, which is an incredible move. It's been part of the UFC since very early on, but all the ways of dealing with the bridge when you're on the top of mount involve killing the bridge, flattening the hips, muffling the bridge so it's not very strong. You can grapevine your legs, you can shift your hips with the bridge, you can post on the floor with your hands so you don't get thrown over. You can pull up on the back of the guy's head so that he can't bridge as far because he can't get his head to the floor. But the moment that guy gets his feet high up on the fence, I have no idea how you'd even try and stop a bridge. I think you'd probably just have to dismount or try and scramble out of it. Because it doesn't take an awful lot of strength at that point to lift your hips up above where the opponent is, on top of you. And then you're forcing a back roll. And I said this in the article, but the answer to it, I suppose, is the same as anything else. Be aware of where you are in the ring. Don't let them get close to it. Or don't let them turn themselves around. Because you saw that before that escape from mount, you saw Jiri using his left hand and left foot on the fence to turn himself around towards it so that his butt was pointing towards the fence as opposed to his head. And if you watch Mansour Barnoui's fight with Habib's cousin, whose name I never remember, but I think he was undefeated at the time, Barnoui gets taken down by the fence and he's always turning himself off the fence or at least parallel to it so that he's not trying to build up on it. Give himself space to move and work. But when you're on the bottom, you want to turn your arse around to the fence so you can get your bridge as high as possible. Really, yeah, impressive stuff. And on the feet, I talked about the Book of Five Rings in my article because Jiri's always on about it. But one of the interesting things about that book is most writing on Bushido is bullshit. A lot of Bushido was made up by the Japanese government in the 1940s to convince young men to jump on planes with half a tank of fuel. And the other part of it is mainly written by samurai who, in the 17 and 1800s, were just rich dudes. Like, that's all they were. You got this professional military class, or caste, who, in like 200 years of complete peace and isolation. So they're talking about swordsmanship, about I've banged on about it for a while, but the Demon's Sermon on Martial Arts is just shit. It's a famous book on the martial arts by an actual samurai, written in 1780 something, I think. But it's just bollocks about ki and feelings and vibes. And Musashi was a legitimate duelist. A duelist is someone who duels with people and then possibly dies, or the opponent dies. If you're dueling with real swords, there's a lot on the line. And Musashi wrote his Book of Five Rings at the end of his life after giving up dueling. But it's quite interesting because it's a book that doesn't talk a lot about specific technique because they didn't have illustrations and shit like that back then, and there just wasn't a lot of point talking about specific technique. Because in a fist fight where I can get hit in the head, and most of the time you're not going to get knocked out outright by getting hit in the head, so you can start trying to set traps and be clever. In a sword fight, it's basically get on the initiative, and the initiative is something that Musashi writes about constantly. Get on the initiative, steal the initiative, do not let that guy's head come up for air. Just smash him as fast, as hard as possible. And that's a lot of what I saw in Jiri in this fight and in the Reyes fight. He works clever and tries to find his moment to land one big shot. And then once he's landed his big shot, he goes ham trying to finish you. And basically every big shot he landed in this fight, he then swarmed on Glover and tried to put as much punishment on him as possible. And then Glover would have to stop him with a takedown attempt or just, diving to his knees, basically. So it's quite interesting in that regard. And I won't, there was some really cool footwork traps done by Jiri in this fight. I won't go into them because it's not very interesting to talk about without diagrams and stuff. Like I said, check the article out. But one of them was something we talked about Francisco Trinaldo doing the other week on the Filthy Casual's Guide to Francisco Trinaldo, which you can still watch on this channel, on the YouTube channel rather, if you're listening to this on a podcasting app. But one of Trinaldo's tricks, and Jiri did it from Southpaw as well, is after a break where you've maybe come out of a clinch or something like that, or the other guy's thrown a kick and missed, and you've just, those natural moments that happen over and over in fights where both of you stop and you go, okay, cool, let's circle back out over there. And you leave your stance and you start walking as if you're walking, not moving around in stance. And the opponent will almost invariably follow you. You just go, okay, we'll go back in the open now. And you start walking around, and then you take a big step with what would be your back foot, when you're sort of side onto the opponent, and you plant it, and then you bounce off it and throw a left straight at them or a right straight. Trinaldo and Jiri both did it with their left hand. So they walked off to their left, planted their left foot, and came back in with a left punch. And he smashed Glover with this punch. It was a real good connection. But yeah, fight was full of clever little tricks like that. Usual Jiri madness. I cannot overstate how much I love this fight. I spent Sunday writing about 2,000 words on it, putting together all my diagrams and shit, and not dissing Valentina Shevchenko as much as people wanted. They were like, "Where's Jack? Where are the sassy tweets about this fight?" I was too busy actually being positive and enjoying something. So I'm going to say it again, go read the article at thefightprimer.com or through the Patreon, or click the link below in YouTube, or on YouTube, because that's all my thoughts laid out much more eloquently than I can here.
Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Tyson Pedro of Eating Crow. Jack Slack, coming before you hat in hand on September 11th, wishing happy thoughts to even the losers and the haters. And we have to have an honest conversation because I was not giving someone their credit. I looked at this middleweight and I said, that's a shitty style. All he does is poke jabs at people. He's very boring. He will never win a UFC title. And now I have to reconsider what I said. Because Gegard Mousasi can for sure beat this bum Sean Strickland, and he's won a UFC title. Way! Is Gegard Mousasi the best middleweight on the planet again? Ignore the losses in Bellator. We're talking about whether he'd beat the UFC champion. No, big upset. One of the big ones. Authored by Sean Strickland on Saturday night. Very impressive. And one that I wrote a large article about immediately afterwards. In fact, as someone pointed out, damn, it took Sean Strickland winning a UFC title to bring back Killing the King. I wrote, How Sean Strickland Killed the King. It's a pretty good article. And yeah, if you don't know, I'm writing breakdowns on Sundays now to get them out in time for people to actually enjoy them. And for them to be, hot off the press when people are just thinking about, I wonder what Slacky thought of that fight. I wonder how Sean Strickland outstruck a guy who fought for a glory title. So yes, plugging that. If you want to know my actual thoughts, and boy am I humbled and do I eat crow. I'm seething over Sean Strickland winning the UFC middleweight title or whatever it is. And it all comes out in that article. All you have to do is go and join the Patreon. And it's just every word is baked, emulsified with my tears over how upset I am by this result. No, honestly, this was about the most interesting result you could have. And I thought, watching the fight, it was an interesting one because I said this about halfway through the article, but not a lot actually happened. There was an awful lot of stuff going on, as in footworking and positioning and so on, but not an awful lot landed. And not aside from the big moment in round one, there weren't an awful lot of big moments. But it's still, it was incredibly exciting to watch because of the implications of everything. It reminded me a lot of, if you've ever seen the film Hero with Jet Li and Donnie Yen and some other people. Jet Li and Donnie Yen meet up and they sit opposite each other, or kneel opposite each other, and then it goes, the battle unfolded in our minds. And then it's low saturation footage of the two of them fighting. And then they come out of it and he goes, well, we both know you'll lose. And then he goes through it with anyway and dies nobly. But there was some real the battle unfolded in our minds shit going on in this one. But yes, go read the article for all the ins and outs of technical stuff. But the gist of it was that some of this we should have seen coming. I mean, on the Boycast I said jabs and double jabs Adesanya's never liked. And we talked about that tons before. When we talked about Robert Whittaker rematch, I was saying, well, I don't understand why people think that this is a foregone conclusion. If Whittaker actually just uses his jab, gets in better position to do it, he can give Adesanya some trouble, and he did. But then we talk about ring craft and getting Adesanya towards the fence, and the jab and the double jab are the tools to do that. Strickland is all about forward pressure, but I didn't think he'd get Adesanya to the fence as much as he did. I thought Adesanya's very good. I mean, people are going to retcon this now, but in MMA, Adesanya is among the best at staying off the fence, and when he hits the fence, he does the smart things. Faking one way, faking the other, going out the direction of least resistance, trying to get you to commit to a side and then circling out the other side. Stuff we talk about all the time when we're talking about Adesanya, and he was doing that, but the problem was that, that takes a lot of energy, and Sean Strickland walking up to you doesn't take him much energy at all. And the words I used in the article were I come to see the method of his madness, and I referenced Musashi. Yep, Sean Strickland is Musashi, that's where we're getting now. But Musashi had a big section on, the only thing Musashi ever said about footwork. He was a fencer, not a fencer, sorry, a duelist in feudal Japan. And the only thing he ever said about footwork was don't worry about footwork. Your feet should just be doing the job of ferrying you across. Any fancy footwork, anything like that, unimportant. And Strickland kind of does that because his footwork is literally just walking. He has none of the wear on him of maintaining a stance or flattening out his stance to sidestep and things like that. He's literally just walking along. And walking is the action that you do all day, every day. You're not going to get tired doing it. Whereas Israel Adesanya, head faking two directions, weaving, doing a juke and then a sidestep to the other side. That stuff will wear on you over time. So that was really interesting. The thing that I didn't read in this fight, which I feel like looking back I should have, is that Israel Adesanya's best punches are all straight. He's not a big hooker.
There's a couple of examples of him hitting people with hooks, but his hooks are like, you watch someone like, I mean, it's an unfair example because Alex Pereira has like the best left hook in kickboxing history. But someone like Alex Pereira, who his hook is powerful, it's smooth, it has a lot of weight behind it, but he doesn't overcommit on it. And then you watch when Izzy wants to throw his left hook and he's like leaning back at the waist, chin in the air. He gets his whole body weight behind it, but he like turns himself with it, and if he misses, he's sort of off position. And it's just never been his best shot. And that was the knockdown in round one. You know, he got backed onto the fence, he bit down on his mouthpiece and said, I'm going to swing, which, fair enough, his last fight, he was losing that, and then he bit down on his mouthpiece and swung, and that worked out great. But he got clipped by Strickland with the right straight down the centre, right straight inside the left hook. Barney Ross called that the most dangerous counterpunch in boxing. If you hit it on someone, they're dead. But on Strickland's part, I was really impressed with the seriousness with which he took this fight. If you watch his first round, he is so disciplined for Sean Strickland. When Izzy throws his first front kick, he parries it across his body. The other hand is up high, ready to catch if it turns into a question mark kick. And everything from then on, there's still some of the same old Strickland reaching for things, but he's constantly aware of Izzy's kicks. And what he does is he walks Izzy down and just takes little steps back whenever Izzy tries to swing off the fence or kick him. And then comes back with a 1-2, and it works really, really well. And you can watch that difference in the economy of motion. Izzy throws a big strike and then has to dart out to the side and run off to the other side of the ring. And Sean Strickland just trots up to him and throws a 1-2, or takes a strike and throws a 1-2 immediately afterwards. Everything he does, because he isn't in a great stance to hit. He doesn't hit with much power most of the time, but he is in the stance where he throws it from all the time, and he could just throw it from basically anything that lands on him. He just throws the 1-2 immediately afterwards. Some of his best connections in this fight are picking up his leg to check a calf kick or a inside low kick, and then poking the jab. But the thing that I think flew under the radar, I've seen a few people's accounts of this fight, or like analyses of this fight, and during the fight too, the commentators said nothing about it. Fucking teeps. I mean, DC literally said, aside from that teep, he hasn't really kicked. He's doing this all with his boxing, and I know the teep, mate. This is one of the best teeping performances I've seen in MMA ever. I'm not exaggerating, because the teep, you see people who can front kick a person's belly button through their back. Sean O'Malley does great work with the front kick. He throws powerful front kicks off the rear leg, and the front kick itself makes the opponent charge at him, and he hits him on the counter. The front kick is his artillery, basically. He throws it from long distance to get the counters that he wants. Conor McGregor did similar things, pushing people back to the fence and front kicking them with his rear leg. I'm talking about little poking, nudging teeps, the kind that cut people off mid-motion. The kind that become really tricky if you're a big kicker. If you watch any Muay Thai, some very big kickers have been thrown off just by their opponent picking up their leg and poking them as they kick. If you get nudged with the ball of someone's foot, or even just the whole sole, you don't even have to be trying to hurt someone. If you nudge them with your foot when they're throwing a power kick, they'll fall over. Not, to their back going, oh, I'm a turtle, I can't get up, but just they'll stumble. And nobody wants to stumble every time they kick, because then they hit the ropes or the fence and you charge in and you hit them. So Strickland was picking up his knees constantly, doing the, sometimes called a Thai march. You see people pick. Jiri Njokwani did it to Alexajuk the other day. He threw a load of right leg kicks, picked up his right knee, stepped through with the left knee. Picking up your knees like that and walking forwards, and it chews up space. And that's the same reason we talk about the double jab. The double jab and the knee raise are two ways to make the guy move without committing anything. And the bonus of the knee raise is that it checks kicks a lot of the time too. Maybe not the best kick. If your leg's not turned out into the kick, it's not as good. But if your leg's up and it stops the guy's shin from wrapping around your liver, that's always good. Or if the guy's kicking your legs and your leg is out of the way. So there was that, and he'd throw little pokes off that, but just picking up the knees and walking forwards was doing great work for Strickland. And then there was the push kick that he hit every time Izzy got towards the fence. He would step up with his lead leg, and because that was the thing, his stance is so short, he's always bringing his back foot up underneath him. And that's something we're going to get into with Tai Tuivasa. Being in a narrow stance makes you more liable to fall over if you're hit well, but it does mean that you can step your rear foot back and lengthen your stance and put yourself in a better position to counterpunch and drop away from things, which is what Strickland was doing a lot. And you can also step forward a bit more you can do like a fencer's thrusting step as opposed to just shuffling forwards. So having your feet underneath you like that makes that possible, but it also means you can pick up your lead leg quickly and poke them with the teep. And Strickland, there were 9 or 10 examples in this fight, I think, of Strickland stepping up as Izzy was just skirting along the fence and poking him with the teep just above the belt line, maybe below his belly button because he wasn't wearing the Usyk super high up to your nip shorts, but just poking him and pushing him back onto the fence. And he wasn't able to... I think that's one of the things in this fight. Strickland wasn't able to often step in and like combination punch off things. He wasn't like Matt Brown. If Matt Brown got the sort of positions that Strickland was getting, he just went ham. He would catch you circling on the fence, he'd push kick you into it, or he'd round kick your guard, and then he'd come in with 4 punches afterwards. And Strickland did that once or twice in the fight, but for most of the 25 minutes, he was just pot-shotting. Another reason, actually, that the Izzy fight, maybe we should have seen this coming, because Izzy is not a combination puncher. He's 1 and 2 at a time. But everything he throws is straight down the centre, and that's what Strickland's good at dealing with. You did see, because Strickland reaches for things when they come down the centre, and he shoulder rolls too, which was nice, but because he reaches for things with his right hand when you jab, Izzy was trying to go jab, left hook around the side, which is, of course, how Alex Pereira caught him. But because Strickland was taking like a half step back every time Izzy came in, his hand would be out of position, but the left hook would hit him in the lead shoulder. There really were a couple of little adjustments that made a big difference for him here. And also because Izzy throws his left hook like a long whipping punch, whereas you would need to step into Strickland's chest and throw it like a big leaping left hook to get to him when he's trying to fade away. Think of Joe Frazier knocking down Muhammad Ali in their first fight, when the great photo of him leaning all the way back and Frazier still getting to him. One of the things that was absolutely wild on the subject of front kicks was Izzy likes to frame on people with his hands and circle out that way. It's nice because if you're good at it, you can get your shoulders up, and basically the shoulder roll, you do not need your arm curled into your body, you don't need your arm high, you just need your shoulder up and your chin down, and you get down behind it. So you can do that with straightened arms. Watch Roy Jones. Vlad Klitschko was good at this. But, that's what the long guard is in Muay Thai. You stay down behind your shoulders. And Izzy's very good at doing that. One of the times that he got caught was by Kelvin Gastelum sort of elbow passing or arm dragging his arm out of the way as he was framing on Gastelum, and then running through where the arm had been and landing some punches. In this fight, whenever Izzy tries to frame on Sean's chest or head, he does it a lot after jabs, actually. He jabs and then leaves his fist out on the guy's head. To sort of push off them. Or when Izzy went southpaw and started trying to hand fight with the lead hand, Sean would pull his lead hand back to free it if he was hand fighting, but Sean would go 2 hands, grab the lead wrist, and throw a front kick. It's the weirdest shit. It was genuinely a new look. I've never seen that done before. Because it's ballsy. You gotta commit 2 hands to one side of the guy's body in a moment where he's supposed to be looking to blast you with the other hand. The reason that people hand fight with that lead hand is so that they can throw their rear hand. So he goes 2 hands on one, grabs the hand, and Izzy's trying to run away at that point, and then he has him chained in place to front kick him. And he did it 3 or 4 times in this fight. It's crazy. Go look at the article. I mean, I think I put up a clip of it on my Twitter as well, just saying brand new hand fighting techers in a joking way. But that was the first time I was watching the fight through, and I thought that's weird. And then that was the first round. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, he starts landing it. Genuinely crazy to watch. I think most of you worked out the key to this was that Izzy got stuck on the back foot, which makes it very hard for a kicker and a guy who likes to pot shot and then take breaks. If you watch him against someone like Cannonier or the first round of Costa was supposed to be the pressure fighter and put him to the fence and stuff, and he runs after him a couple of times and then he just sort of stares at him. And those are the fights. I think that's why Izzy gets a reputation for boring fights. And it happened to Jose Aldo too. You get ahead and then you're like, why would I make wild exchanges? I'm being the surgeon here. I'm taking this guy apart. And there was none of that in this fight. Sean just kept walking up to him. And he's having to do big, lateral movement is hard work. Moving constantly is hard work. He's having to throw kicks on the back foot, which is just, really hard to do. People used to there was one dude in particular who used to get angry at me when I go you can't kick on the back foot. And it's not strictly true. You can slide back and time a kick, but you've got to have a really good read on the guy's movement, and he's got to give you the space to do it. Basically, if you keep someone backing up the whole time, it makes it very hard for them to kick effectively. because they constantly risk you stepping up the inside of the kick. I think if they do a rematch, you got to look for more knees and elbows from Izzy. One of the things that you can do to combat constant forward pressure, especially when the guy wants to stand right on top of you, is to try and land some knees to the belly. Great example of that would be like Czech Congo versus Sergei Haritonov from the other year. I'm always talking about that one, but Sergei Haritonov was battering him, walking him down. And then Czech Congo goes, oh shit, and like closes his eye, throws a knee, hits Sergei Haritonov in the body. And Sergei makes like a visible, oh, I didn't like that. And then Czech Congo just continues circling the cage and landing these knees for the next couple of minutes until he gets the finish. Still the same old Strickland in most ways. Not a lot of body work, which I would have loved to see. I mean, particularly, not a lot of low kicks, which I would love to see. Like, when he was getting like, come on, motherfucker, at the end, you see what he values as like an actual real strike. Because where most people, when they go like, come on, motherfucker, would be swinging like Max Holloway versus Ricardo Lamas, he does a step-up low kick. And it's like one of about 3 he's thrown in the fight. So that's how he values those. I thought it was very funny that he twice attempted, when Izzy parried his front kick, he twice attempted to spinning back fist off it, including in that bit at the end where he's like, come on, motherfucker. I was going to be like, that's the one he did against Orlando Sanchez, R.I.P. If you've never seen that clip, very funny. Orlando Sanchez, bit of a piece of shit as a person. Can't speak ill of the dead because he has died since then. Don't want to make a joke about Strickland dim-macking him with the back fist, but I already have, so I'm sorry. But he was the most boring ADCC winner ever. He won the biggest grappling championship in grappling by not winning a single point. He won every match by shoving people and getting advantages. And then there's footage of him and Sean Strickland grappling on the feet, and he hits a little elbow crank on Strickland, and Strickland's like, motherfucker, and teeps him and then tries to spinning backhand him. It was pretty funny given that Strickland like knocks people out who just aren't on his level in sparring and puts clips of it online. But it was very funny that he went for that move twice here. And I suppose it's something that he's got to have drilled into him, because if you throw a lot of lead leg push kicks or lead leg teeps or lead leg front kicks of the snapping variety, you're going to get them parried at some point in the fight. So you've got to have something to back it up. And turning into the spinning back fist is always a good choice. The Korean Zombie had a kickboxing match years ago against some decent kickboxer. And the spinning back fist was not legal in the fight, but he knocked him out with it anyway. And it was like such a moral victory for Chan Sung-jung to knock this guy out with an illegal strike. But yes, is there anything more to say? I mean, there's loads more to say about actual technical stuff. Go read the article, How Sean Strickland Killed the King. It's on my Patreon. Just thinking about results like this, I am not excited. I think the words that I said on the podcast, I was listening back to the Boycast to hear what I said about this fight ahead of time. And I say like, well, perhaps he does some work with the jab. Perhaps he does some good work with the double jab. Both things that Izzy has trouble with, blah, 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 blah. And then I went, but if he wins this fight, I can't see him becoming an interesting fighter. So I think this fight was real, because I was watching it, I was really compelled. But I think it was interesting because of all the context and the stakes. And like I said, the battle unfolding in their minds. There weren't an awful lot of big strikes landed after that first round. And not a single takedown attempted. Did like the one time that Strickland got caught out of position and Izzy threw some strikes at him and Strickland ducked into the clinch. That was a good move. But am I hyped to pay for Sean Strickland pay-per-views? No, not really. Am I hyped for Strickland versus Cannonier too? No, not really. But I can say, like, without an ounce of shame, no, I can say without an ounce of a lie, that this was genuinely very exciting. And these are the sort of results that, like, are exciting for me, because I started doing this just like writing studies of fighters to improve myself, to learn more about fighting myself. And, when you see someone, you can watch the fight and you can understand why it's happening. Or, certainly if you've got a good level of technical understanding, you can understand why it's happening. And you're going like, damn, I can't believe I didn't see a bit of that coming. And those are the ones that make you like reconsider how you see things. And those are really exciting, to be honest. The reason that I whacked out an article within like 6 hours watching this event was because I was psyched as hell. So thank you, Sean Strickland, for not only like doing an amazing upset and giving me something to write about, but like motivating me to write something. I never thought being excited by a Sean Strickland fight would make that happen. And then, of course, he called out his deadbeat dad. And if you remember the Pantoja fight, I'm all up for calling out deadbeat dads. I think we should all get together and beat up Sean Strickland's dad. Unless he's dead. I don't actually listen to much of the pre-fight stuff. But, yes, being the king of the apex is the best base for MMA. Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Ronan Keating of not quite live tweeting, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you. Well, I'm recording this Sunday night. We're coming at you Monday, probably. I'm on the road. So, disclaimer, I haven't watched all of this event. I'm not going to talk about all of it. Maybe we'll touch in on the other stuff on the Boycast later in the week. But I wanted to talk about the main event because it was so terrific. We hoped it would be terrific. We said this is a great matchup, stylistically. Great matchup in terms of accolades. Just who is doing stuff in MMA right now, and it's these two. And yeah, it was doubly weird because the rest of the card wasn't super stacked, and the UFC doubled down by not promoting it at all, instead focusing on hourly tweets about Power Slap, including Dana White, who spent the week forgetting Islam Makhachev's name, and then didn't go to the event in Australia. But that's all bollocks. The good stuff was the fight. I thought this was absolutely terrific. I thought I expect there will be people coming in and they will moan about how positive I am on Volkanovski, as if that's some kind of slight on Makhachev. Makhachev is the best lightweight in the world. Don't think anyone's arguing with that right now. Well, they might be arguing that Volkanovski is, but until this fight, Makhachev was the best lightweight in the world. It's one of the strongest divisions in the world. It's historically a ridiculously strong division in which basically any number of title defenses is incredible. And Volkanovski was doing something ridiculous by going up in weight to fight Makhachev. It's possible to go up in weight to a worse division. Sometimes that happens at heavyweight. Now, there are different problems you'll encounter going up to heavyweight because you aren't dealing with a 10-pound jump. You're dealing with a infinite pound up to 265-pound jump. You could be a guy who's making 205 and now suddenly you're fighting guys who are struggling to get to 265. But generally, I think this and maybe Cejudo's are the hardest, jump ups I've seen. McGregor, Eddie Alvarez was always an elite fighter. He's a great fighter. Even when he fought McGregor, he was a great fighter. But stylistically, that one was quite favourable for McGregor. And of course, Amanda Nunes, we don't even care about that double belt. It doesn't really matter. Because they could add a women's lightweight division and give her a belt for fighting the same people she's fighting at bantamweight and featherweight, but heavier. Then you consider that Islam Makhachev is a big lad. He's a big lightweight. Him and Khabib both have had big trouble with weight cuts in the past because they're willing to go to the brink of kidney failure to get every ounce of advantage they can in a fight. And, they, in addition to being technically brilliant and very, very strong, being massive is a big advantage. So for Alexander Volkanovski to fight as well as he did here was flabbergasting. I was slapped upside the head by his brilliance in this fight. Now, it was a back-and-forth fight. Do not get mad at me for praising Volkanovski, but he was doing it with, walking around 20 pounds lighter than Islam Makhachev. And before we get into the details of the fight, can I just say how stupid everything about pound for pound is now? Pound for pound was invented so that boxing writers could talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, how brilliant he was, how he was the best fighter in the world, but he would still lose if he fought like a light heavyweight or a heavyweight, because that is a hard thing to reconcile for Joe Average. So the idea is that per pound of body weight, he's the best, skill-wise. It is a compliment of someone's skill. It's not a list of accomplishments. And it isn't a fucking belt that you can win from someone, especially if they're the one coming up in weight. If you have a close fight with someone who's from the weight class below, you don't become a pound for pound better fighter than them because they almost beat you and they're smaller. So with that out of the way, and I will say any detailed breakdown of who your pound for pound is, I don't give a shit. I will never give a shit. Pound for pound is stupid. But if you're going to use the words, know what they mean. But this is just another facet of us being held to ransom by a panel of guys who do the UFC rankings. 12 guys now, dropped from 14 because they just got bored. 2 of them got bored doing it. And it's just 12 randomers from random radio shows in Manaus. Some of them work for websites who haven't published an article in 3 years. So, the fight. Let's talk about it. Let's wrap. I unlocked the Advanced Striking 2.0 of Alexander Volkanovski. Go check that out. If you aren't a Patreon boy, go check it out because it's free for everyone now. But that was to say sorry for missing Monday podcast, and just because it's cool, go read that stuff. However, all the stuff in that tended to be about what he does against mainly orthodox opponents. Islam Makhachev, obviously southpaw and doesn't switch. Max Holloway did fight southpaw for periods of their fights, but he's a switch hitter. So, a lot of those fights was also just against another orthodox fighter. When Max did go southpaw in their first fight, Volkanovski did what is called a shifting right hook. He stepped through and threw the right hook as a southpaw. It's a big move. He has to do a big move because he's a small man. He has to cover a lot of distance. So what he does is he slips his head either to the outside of the opponent's lead shoulder or ducks it down towards the opponent's chest, steps all the way through with his right foot, and then throws the right hook from almost on top of the opponent. But it's a real commitment to get there, which is what made him so susceptible against Max in the second fight to knees and uppercuts, intercepting knees and intercepting uppercuts as he was stepping in. And you saw Makhachev trying to do that. He landed a couple of good knees here. It's this thing where Volkanovski has to go hard. He has to go fast and move through all that distance to get to the guy. That's never going to be something that he, just doesn't have to do because he's small. But he can make it very hard for people to time him by showing lots of feints, lots of fakes, lots of false entries. And that's why it is so hard for most of these opponents to time him. Everyone sees that big shift and they know it's a big move, but he still gets away with it. And that was the shift that, it was a huge part of his game in this one. He didn't do an awful lot else, to be honest, on the feet. It was the shift, the odd 1-2, the step up left outside kick. But that shifting right hook was pretty much everything. If you remember towards the end of the first round, he steps in with a shifting right hook and he throws a left straight afterwards from southpaw and he wobbles Makhachev where he's standing. He did, however, get dinged hard in the first round by shifting in, throwing the right hook, right hook, left straight, stood there in the pocket with Makhachev, and he got dinged and realized that Makhachev hits pretty hard. He's not the most technical striker in the world. He's not a great combination striker, but he's got a good eye for an opening. He's got decent timing, and he can clobber people with power. Whereas Max Holloway, not only not a huge hitter, but also measures himself, doesn't throw particularly hard if he doesn't have to. Makhachev will load up and swing. So that shifting right hook was a theme throughout the entire night. He was using it to get in, and then he'd throw the left low kick afterwards from southpaw, which landed really well. I would have loved to see more of that because it was the way that Makhachev was standing meant that he never ever checked low kicks and never avoided them because he was standing long because he liked to lean back with the counter right hook as Volkanovski was coming in, or swing in onto his lead leg with the big overhand left. So his legs were always there. And Volkanovski was getting them on the way out of combinations. Obviously, kicking against guys who want to pick up your legs, dangerous, but he did land a great deal of low kicks, and his corner was saying, his legs are getting tired now. So I imagine if they do a rematch, expect more low kicking. One thing that I like with that shifting right hook, he also does, he'll shift and then he'll throw the right hook to the body instead, and then throw the left straight upstairs. Lead hook to the body, rear straight to the head, classic setup, love it. One of my favorite things to do on the bag when I'm just arsing around is from orthodox, left hook to the body, right straight to the head, and then jab, cross, jab. Just finish with 3 punches. Body shot, head shot, 3 punches to finish, move your head, get offline. It's a really good way to just build some artificial volume, land a good shot, and then keep the guy off you if he, to stop him from countering or coming back. Liked Makhachev's kicking in this fight. He's always had a good left kick to the body, round kick and front kick. Those are annoying for Volkanovski, especially as he's dealing with such a length disparity. I was watching this knowing that Yair Rodriguez is getting the next title shot and going, yeah, that's something you're going to want to shore up when you fight Yair. The amount of left body kicks that went in fairly uncontested. But I think the thing that blew everyone's tits off was the grappling. Islam Makhachev has obviously been a monster getting people on the mat. Really good at flattening people out, really good at muscling people around or just holding people down when they start to wall walk. It's similar to Khabib. They just love when people start to wall walk and they just follow them up to the feet. If they do get all the way up to the feet, they follow them up into the back body lock and then they hit that mat return. One of the things that really interested me in this fight was we talked about there are going to be multiple ways to skin a cat where you're not meeting Islam or Khabib before this in their area of strength. We talked about turning off the fence. A great example of that is Mansour Barnaoui, who had a great match with Islam Makhachev in a ring without a cage to wall walk on, but just by playing bottom really, really actively and creating momentum and using it to sweep and come up. But he also had a great fight against one of their teammates recently, Shamil something, Zubarikov, or I can't remember his name. But that whole fight, the guy's taking him down, and Mansur Bono, he's in his half guard, and he's reaching out with his arm and leg and pushing off the fence to turn himself around so that he's not wall walking. So we talked about that, maybe turning into the middle of the fence, but Volkanovski, when he was taken down along the fence, he was able to wall walk quite well. And what he did was he got back up to his feet and exposed the back. But one of the really interesting things about this, I had flashes of, he was like Sakuraba if someone had left a load of heavy books on top of his head. He was a sawn-off Sakuraba in this fight, because what he did was he stood up into the back body lock or turned his back when Makhachev clinched him. And instead of being along the fence, his head was against the top of his head was into the fence, and his arse was out towards the center of the cage, which made for some really interesting positions or really interesting follow-ups, because when you want to mat return someone or you want to lift someone, you get your arms locked around them from behind and you step around to the side, and you typically get your knee in front of their knee. So you can either pop your hips in and lift them, or you can just sag down on them and they'll fall down onto their knees. Watch like the Khabib Abel Trujillo fight, or watch Thiago Moises versus Islam Makhachev. Get in behind a guy, just keep mat returning him. It's a really low, not effort. I mean, it is effort, but it's not like lifting a dude or diving after someone's legs. You are just stepping around the corner and sagging on them and returning them to the mat. And if you watch some of the very good wrestlers out there in the world in pure wrestling, or if you watch Gary Tonin in grappling, he does this a lot because he turns his back a lot to do victor rolls and get on the legs. But guys will stand up into the body, and the opponent will have the back body lock, and they will bend forward at the waist, put their hands out behind them like they're doing a little aeroplane thing, and the hands stop the guy's hips coming around the side of you. And by doing that, you can make a lot of their mat returns a lot harder, because if you're bent forward and your weight's a bit forward, they can't really lift you into a suplex without giving themselves a hernia. And if they want to try and step around you, your hands can block them, which is a fairly simple move in wrestling. And there are attacks that don't involve going into their hands, or that you can use to then free up space to try and get a mat return. But what happened here was that because Volkanovski's head was against the fence, even though he was fighting the hands, Makhachev couldn't step round the side of him and drive him forwards. If you go and watch that Trujillo-Khabib fight, that's full of mat returns. And he steps around the side and he drives Trujillo forwards like his face into the mat. But Volkanovski's face is on the fence. So what Makhachev does on two of these occasions is he steps around the side and he tries to sit down and pull Volkanovski on top of him. And the first time Volkanovski almost gets on top and then ends up just underneath him for the end of the first round, I think that was. And the second time is when Volkanovski sort of ends up on top of him and then turns all the way over and gets up. And that was that huge moment where everyone was like, oh my God, he's able to get up against Islam Makhachev. And it wasn't because he got stuck under Islam Makhachev in the same positions that all those other dudes did. It's because Islam Makhachev didn't like where he was a bit annoyed, and tried to pull him down in a way that just gave Volkanovski the space to turn back into him and stand up. It was really quite slick. I mean, I don't know if there's any names for these things, but I've seen guys do it before, head into the fence and butt back. But typically, you'll see a lot of guys just leaning their shoulder on the fence and trying to fight the hands like that. You could see that Volkanovski was very disciplined about head into the fence, butt back. It did mean that Makhachev could try and put in a hook and get on his back standing, but that's less of a concern than just being dragged down over and over again. If you're Alexander Volkanovski, probably. I mean, he did end up with him on his back and got sort of stalled there. But that was once they were on the mat. It's work to get a guy from standing to the mat, even if you climb up on his back. So yeah, that was really interesting. That counter to the sort of fence work. When you watched Volkanovski turn Makhachev onto the fence himself, Makhachev is so wily from that position. We talked about it loads in the past. Back when Khabib was the champion, I was saying, look at Islam Makhachev for things to do when you're on the back of the back end of those cage wrestling exchanges, because he's the same size as Khabib and he's been Khabib's longest training partner. If anyone's dealing with it, it's him day to day. And what he's always done is he stands quite short, and he tends to brings his feet sort of facing the same direction to the side. And what he'll do is he'll just dig these little knees to the body with an overhook and a hand on like a wrist or a V-block in the bicep. And he'll knee a guy in the body, and then they'll knee back. And when they knee back, he steps across and throws them. And he did it to Charles Oliveira in his last one. He did it to Thiago Moises. He's done it to a load of guys. Just with his back to the fence, he just gives you a couple of little knees. And they don't even look like they've got much on them because they're coming straight up. They're not even going in. But it's enough to make the other guy knee back. And he knows that when they're on one leg, he can throw him. So what I really liked was Volkanovski didn't fuck around with that. When he turned Makhachev onto the fence and Makhachev kneed him a couple of times, he, instead of trying to knee back hard, he did a little outside foot sweep, an outside trip, and framed off the face at the same time, freed his hands and started punching. And that's something that Volkanovski was doing loads in his early UFC run. If you watch his fight with Mizuto Hirota, he basically just pushes Hirota to the fence, frees his hands and starts swinging. And he does it loads of times and really hurts Hirota a couple of times. I really like that. Physically pushing the guy against the fence, freeing your hands, and hitting him while he's in a bad position to defend himself. Nobody wants to be boxing from a feet level stance against the fence. There was a really nice one in I think it was the fourth round. Volkanovski pushed him to the fence. He had the one underhook. Islam Makhachev was on the overhook and did the little knee. Volkanovski used his other forearm in front of Islam's face and started pulling his head down as if he was trying to knee him. Like Roman Delice versus Kyle Dorcas, or Josh Barnett versus Frank Mir. Pull their head down against the cage and knee him in the head. Because if the guy doesn't do something about it, a knee to the head is a very serious thing to take. And Makhachev's trying to stand up as he's pulling him down, and he lets go, knees him in the thigh instead, and then starts swinging on the way out. It was really nice. The breaks from clinches were lovely. That little outside trip, I like it because he wasn't getting, didn't seem to be a huge threat of him getting thrown off it, and he could use it to break and keep throwing punches. As with any close decision, there's a lot of talk about the back control, backpacking. Lots of people upset about that. Live by the sword, die by the sword. I loved it when Aldo did it to Petr Yan, and now I have to accept that Islam Makhachev did it to Alexander Volkanovski. I feel like Aldo was at least looking for chokes the entire time. Makhachev did seem to just want to keep the position. And it's sort of it's a catch-22 for Volkanovski, because if you try too hard to escape, you're going to make a fucking error, and he's going to slip that hand under your neck without having to hand fight you. I'm thinking of the one the other day. Alan Nascimento fought some lad. He got the back triangle on the ground, and the lad was doing fine, and there was something like 40 seconds left in the round. I'm going, okay, well, he's out of that. Because at the end of the round, they start you on the feet again. But instead, he decided to walk up the cage, bridge off the fence, turn all the way over onto his belly, and he almost got flattened out and choked there. But then he stood up, he powered his way up so that he didn't get flattened out. But in doing that, he put both hands on the floor, and Alan Nascimento went, "Oh, there's your neck," and just grabbed it. So he ended up getting choked out standing from the body triangle instead of just being in the body triangle for another 40 seconds and restarting at the end of the round. And that is, it's a perfectly viable way to fight. It's as a lazy old man grappler nowadays, a lot of what I do is just wait for people to try and get out of fairly bad positions and grab things that I want when they do. It's a lot less work than trying to separate elbows and things like that. Separate elbows from the body, create submission opportunities. And then the crackdown stuff was really interesting. Both Makhachev and Khabib like shooting their singles with the head on the outside and bringing you down onto a hip. Think of Khabib versus McGregor, the very first exchange of that fight. And the crackdown is like a sort of, it's like a dogfight. It's either man could end up in a really good position off it. We talk about Rani Yahya using it a lot. Full-time Twitter reply guy Jake Shields used to do it a lot when he was a part-time fighter. But it's also, the opposite side of that is that the guy can get on your back or threaten to come up on your back. And a great example of that is Gordon Ryan versus Lucas Hulk Barbosa in ADCC. He went from a crucifix. He was on the crucifix on the back, but he didn't have any points for it. So he let himself sag down into a crackdown where Barboza was almost coming up on top of him, and then he used that to get onto the back properly. But Volkanovski was using the top part of the crackdown well in this one. Cruz was talking about it, like if you can step over the ankle, you can start making stuff happen. And then the last notable moment of the fight was the knockdown in round 5. There were a couple of moments like this earlier in the fight. This one did hit him, but there was a couple of moments where Makhachev got back to the fence and Volkanovski came in punching and Makhachev sort of dropped to his knees to try and get a reactive takedown. And it looked really bad. It looked like he'd been hurt, but then you watched it in slow motion again and nothing really landed. But he did seem to get flustered near the fence. And particularly in that last round when he was looking at the clock every 20 seconds, pushing him back to the fence, he did not seem to like it. And it was the same with Khabib, in that one round against McGregor where McGregor got something going. Really doesn't like shooting off the back foot, really doesn't like working off the back foot much. Likes to be setting the terms of engagement himself. And then Volkanovski got on top in close guard and just started going body head like Mark Coleman way back in the day. It was a really good last round for him. The decision, neither here nor there. I could see 3-2 either way. I have trouble seeing 4-1, like that one judge got it. I would not call robbery either way. And I know that a lot of people are going to use this to be like, well, Islam Makhachev almost lost to a midget, but Islam Makhachev didn't almost lose to anyone else. So really, this fight is just, man, how good is Alexander Volkanovski? And the answer is incredibly good. If he isn't a star already in Australia, he deserves to be. And, the willingness to step up and put yourself on the line like that with that huge size disadvantage, when he already fights with a reach and range disadvantage in his own division, is, really commendable.